to nature-based solutions and ensuring that they are integrated within the policies and plans of government. Chair, today we are having a capacity building workshop, which was supposed to be held a few months ago. But as you know, due to a number of conflicting demands and timeliness, including the COP preparations, we were a bit delayed to convene this activity. But nonetheless, we are here and convening it. And most especially, I want to send our sincere thanks to the representatives of our indigenous peoples who have made it in the room. We have colleagues from Bari, we have a colleague as far as from Mountain Elgon, and I know our partners in southwestern Uganda, especially the Battle representatives, would have wished to join us, but they communicated they have a week-long series of engagements for their partners, and they couldn't join us physically, but they are with us remotely, and we are honored to have them. That is the sense of spirit they attach to this. So, Madam Chair, I just want to run through, with your permission, the scene setting such that we can catch up with time. And in particular, I just want to say, Madam Chair, that the subject of indigenous peoples and local communities in Uganda is a taboo. That whenever you talk of such terminologies, everyone looks at you with a different eye. But these are things, especially in natural resource management, we have lived with and we know they exist. Next. For example, we know, Madam Chair, that next. We know that up to now, a number of interpretation on who an indigenous person has failed to come to conclusion. Most of the developing countries, especially countries which have huge natural resources in Africa, have deliberately refused to define what is indigenous peoples. One country I don't want to mention for political reasons made sure that in the UN, it said that for it is moving in homogeneity. Everyone is homogeneous. So everyone in that country was what? Was indigenous. But I'm so grateful to countries in Latin America. Countries like Ecuador, countries like Bolivia, countries like Brazil have moved steps and legislated on what an indigenous person is. However, countries in Africa have decided to do a dark ink on indigenous peoples. And then countries in Asia Pacific, especially the Indonesians and others, those highly forested countries, have tried to work on small legislations providing for who such peoples are. I have two definitions here, which I want to share with you because it's a capacity building workshop, but these are not given. The first definition is a definition which took around almost 30 years on defining who an indigenous people is. Anyone in the room who knows why and when the definition of indigenous people started? The discussion around indigenous peoples started when all of us were being colonized. The colonizers reached a time and they were being pushed and asked whom they were colonizing. Those who were colonized were saying we are the actual original people. The colonizers are saying us being the ones who first came to sit on you, then we take all the powers above you. And some of you have heard, there's been a lot of contestations within the Red Indians, that is as far as the Americas is concerned, New Zealand and Australia with its aborigines, and other jurisdictions like China and Mongolia. However, some documents continue to define them as tribal peoples in independent countries whose social, culture, and economic conditions distinguish them. And I made that in bold, that these are the social, cultural, and economic conditions which continue to distinguish them. And it goes on to say that their status may be regulated wholly or partially by their own customs or traditions or special laws and regulations. My brother, Charles Topot, whom I've known for the last 20 plus years, will tell you that the way a process of punishing a culprit in their society is done is not written anywhere. But it's the procedure they follow year in and year out. Okay? They don't have written what? Laws in ink. But my land friends in the room and online will tell you, you must have the penal code. The penal code should stipulate what and where. I was told even we have issued the arresting guidelines on how to arrest people and so forth and so on. But there are people who self-identify themselves. And basically, they have been known to identify themselves related to land. And in addition to either natural resources or their ancestral territories and their cultural districts. Now, the International Labour Organization was the first convention which tried to muscle out issues of differentiating between originals, indigenous, and others. Why am I saying International Labour Organization? Yes, because around the 1920s, it was becoming a key concern that some of the workers were being pushed to the wall, that even some were being pushed from land they knew was their land, but because they were working for their colonizers. So with those two definitions, I would want that we can use them as our working definitions for now until when we move forward. Next. Before we say that there is anything which gives justification to someone, there has to be an instrument. Whether you are indigenous, whether you are a citizen, whether you are the original, there has to be something defining you. For example, in Uganda, what defines a Ugandan? Some of you who used to apply for the passports, you remember how they used to define a Ugandan? Most Ugandans were defined by what? By descent. Your great grand was located in this locality, whose jurisdictions are within what? A state called what? Republic of Uganda. Slowly we moved to go to defining Ugandans by registration. Then, slowly we have moved, now we define Ugandans by what? Naturalization. Okay? So, there are global instruments which have been giving effect to recognizing indigenous peoples and their rights. And the snapshot is there. One is the International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racist Discrimination. That was in 1980, and all of you know, except if you have never traveled. But if you have ever traveled, you might have dosed or subjected to a dose of racism, isn't it? Anyone here who has traveled and you have never been subjected to a dose of racism, then you were born lucky. But if you have ever traveled and associated with another kind of breed. Natural science says that the first reaction for organisms is to fight to create a defense around themselves. So racism, when you read Darwin's principle, those used to be some of the natural means of defending yourself. You first keep away all externalities. So Uganda has ratified that convention as early as 1980. And I think up to now, government has never receded. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Remember the big wave of the Martin Luther Kings and others when they were moving and demanding the number of rights. Some of you didn't know that Americans who were black and red never had voting rights, yet they were Americans. But after a lot of pressure, they started to graduate and be given rights. And those are some of the global instruments which gave them power. What am I trying to say? That there is always a struggle for you to have a right to be recognized. The common one, which my colleagues, the Batwa, Bennett, Tepeth, Eek, and others associate with, is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The interesting thing about this declaration, it is the one which most developing country governments decided not to be present when it was signed. In Eastern Africa, DRC, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda were not present. Up to date, they are not present. But you can tell why things move this way. The other one is the ILO Convention 107, and which was again updated to 169. Now, this is the only convention. I'm telling you, its birth was from a wrong man, but the offspring was good. Why am I saying a wrong man? It was given effect under labor dispute issues. But within the labor dispute issues, it gave birth to one recognition. It is the first global convention to recognize the right to land for indigenous peoples. Now, when it made that typical farm statement, a number of governments decided not to ratify it. And it is one of the conventions a number of governments have put in ink and registered a depository with the Secretary General that for us, we are not a party to that convention. The other one, the UNESCO Convention on the Promotion and Protection of Diversity of Culture Exploration. This convention, one of its provisions was giving lieu of recognizing special lands whose cultural heritage has a direct linkage with special tribal group. That's the plan that convention did. And that's why I was not shocked when President Donald Trump, the first UN body he refused to give money was UNESCO, because they used to disturb them a lot with that body. Suspect. So Uganda has also not ratified the UNESCO Convention. However, I missed one. There is the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD. Now, these are what we call weak conventions, or we call, in law, I think they are the ones you call attendant legislations or related legislation. The main global instruments are the first four. The rest have a bearing. For example, the Convention on Biological Diversity is where it provides for access rights, indigenous people's knowledge of conservation, and so forth and so on. but it is weak because it failed to recognize the right land. The recent one, the Paris Agreement, I'm so excited about the Paris Agreement because the framers sneaked what most of others did not see. The preamble paragraph of the Paris Agreement recognizes and it commits all parties to the Paris Agreement that they should respect the rights of individuals. Now, you can dodge, you don't sign ILO and the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but if you have domesticated the Paris Agreement without special reservations on some provisions, then you are in for it. And they made sure that even if you, because some governments are very wise, that even if they domesticate a global instrument, they make reservations on some clauses and articles. But these ones, the framers of the Paris Agreement put it in the preamble. Now, there is no way you can say we have acceded to the Paris Agreement, but not to the preamble. So in the preamble, meaning you are taking everything which is there. So, next. One case in common in Uganda, which many of you use, is the case of Bakwa. This is a case a number of us in natural resource management, especially in forestry studies, is taught. And it's a classical case because to some people who read about nested institutions, who read about self-governance as a tool in natural resource management, say that it is a case of a mistrust. Uganda was one of the first countries to enact a forestry legislation. In 1927, we enacted our first Forestry Act. And for some of you who were not born by then, apart from us, who knew we would be born, our colonizer or our protectorate by then was interested in strict conservation. That is why places like Kidepo were ring-fenced. That is why there was the thrust to ring-fence places like Kikuya, to ring-fence places like Mwindi, Kahi. So over the years, a number of legislation in Uganda moved towards ring-fencing these as protected areas. And in 1991, there is a certain group of people that ended up leaving certain area when it was turned into a park. And consequently, negotiations were made. And one of the negotiations was to establish a trust. And that trust, those are some of its objectives. And as time moved on, some benefits accrued, like purchase of land, but something turned. Next. One of the turning was a group of people organized under Ubuntu, lodged a constitutional petition. I'm not a lawyer, but Daphne and team tell us whenever you have an issue with the Constitution, you petition. Am I right? So if you have any issue with the definition of Uganda, you can lodge a constitutional petition. So in 2013, they lodged a constitutional petition. 2013. In 2021, how many years are those? How many? 8 years. One Landy friend made the following declaration. 1. Ancestors of the present generation of Batwa people had an interest in and or owned the whole of or part of the area of land on which present day Ichuya Forest Reserve, Mogahinga Gorilla National Game Park, and Bwindi Impenetrable Forest National Game Park situated. Secondly, no adequate compensation was paid to Batwa people by the government for loss of their land and so many other things, and affected their livelihood, but also destroyed their self-esteem and their identity as people. I never used to attend Indigenous Peoples Permanent Forum because I used to joke with them. I have my friend Lucy Muleke from Kenya, who once told me, it is only at international level we are listening to the art. At national level, we are not listening to the art, which is partly true. And she says, the pain they have when they speak their languages, we don't understand, isn't it? Because they are fewer. We are many who speak English. So in a bid for them to try to understand English, to communicate to you their challenges, they are slowly losing their self-esteem. Do you know how you lose self-esteem? It's when you lose your language. Today, if you stop speaking your language and you are adopting another language, you will lose identification and esteem. So the pain I got from the Indigenous Permanent Forum, Indigenous Peoples Permanent Forum in New York was their languages are dying. Their dialects have been erased. Some used to speak with animals. Did you know that? Now, the offsprings they give, they can't even call a cow. They even can't tell you if a cow mourns, what it is meaning. They have lost something. So, justice said that it's okay, ordered that matter be referred to the High Court such that evidence is heard and appropriate affirmative action measures may be undertaken to address the appealing situation of the Batwa people. Today, I don't know if there is anyone who has information on whether the High Court has taken action on that. But I know our colleagues from Ubuntu are also online, and we'll hear from them. Madam Chair, this presentation was engaged to just trick our brains, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ruben, for sensating. It was very informative. So the next item on our agenda is a presentation on access and benefits labor regime in Uganda by a representative from the Environment Unit.
Stand.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Muhindo Morgan. I work with Environment Shield. I'm a lawyer. I do some of the research and also participate in some of the strategic litigation work that the Environment Shield, together with Harold Kiza and Gisha, are doing. So my task is very simple. Simple in such a way that I'm supposed to represent Aaron, but also a little bit complicated because I know the shoes that I'm getting into. They are literally very long and also figuratively long. But I'll try my level best to deliver his message that he had prepared for this gathering. Only that he also shares his apologies for not making it. He got an emergency and I had to step in for him because he values the work that you people are doing. So first and foremost, my task is to present the legal framework on access and benefit legal regime in Uganda. And first and foremost, the presentation itself is concentrating on the domestic legal framework. And we all understand that when it comes to the hierarchy of laws, the Constitution of Uganda is over and above all the laws that we have in Uganda. And then subsequently, I'll be discussing some specific pieces of legislation passed by Parliament. Then also subsidiary pieces of legislations that have been designed under those acts of Parliament that establish the legal regime on access and benefit sharing, especially when it comes to natural resources. So first and foremost, the aspects of the environment are provided for under the Constitution. And the first thing that we look at are the national objectives. Specifically, when you look at the objective number 27, that requires the state to promote sustainable development and public awareness of the need to manage land, air, water, resources in a balanced and sustainable manner for the present and future generation. So this is an obligation that the state itself has, and the aspect of sustainable utilization brings in the aspect of access. So that's how you end up with a regime that regulates on how you access, for example, genetic resources. Then at the end of the day, if we're talking about for the benefit of the people, present and the future, at the end of the day, if it's one person who is generating, for example, if it's resources or generating knowledge, that knowledge should benefit the people that are present. That knowledge should also benefit the people that will come later. So that's the aspect of sustainable utilization of these natural resources, and that involves land. And we all understand that most of the genetic resources are inhabited by land, and that's why you have all the forests, you have the water, you have all of these natural resources. So that's how important land can be or is. So the other aspect also that the utilization of natural resources of Uganda shall be managed in such a way as to meet the development and the environment needs of the present and the future. Again, it is almost the same aspect, but at the end of the day, what is being emphasized under this state directive is that we must develop the tools, or there must be tools that facilitate the utilization of natural resources in a sustainable manner. And now you can imagine an instance where you have, but okay, You can imagine an instance where you don't have a legal framework that facilitates the use of the natural resources that we have. That, for example, someone with capital will come into Uganda and they're utilizing the genetic resources, but at the end of the day, those resources are not benefiting the individual people, other than the indigenous communities or the indigenous people. So at the end of the day, that's why you need such kind of a framework, and that's why we have such kind of provisions in the Constitution, specifically to balance the competing interest, one of conservation, but also at the same time, utilization of these natural resources. So specifically, when you go to, and the reason why I'm setting the national objectives, in most cases, the arguments, okay, before there are arguments that you cannot enforce these national objectives and directives, but until the Constitution was amended, I think there was a constitutional petition that I forget that led to the enforcement that of those national objectives. So you can base on those national objectives to hold the state and any other person accountable, because you're going to realize that when it comes to the enforcement of this Constitution or the obligations, especially when it comes to rights, the obligations are not just on the state alone, but any other person that deals with rights. So if it comes to protection of the environment and conservation, it's not just the duty of the state alone, but the duty of every actor, including development partners, investors that in most cases utilize or invest in technologies that are related to some of the genetic resources. So at the end of the day, the importance of having such kind of provision is Article 8A of the Constitution that makes the national objectives justifiable. That one always challenges me, but the whole issue is that you can enforce the national objectives against the state and against any other person, so long as that matter involves matters to do with rights, and we all agree that we all have a right to a clean and healthy environment, right? Yes. So when we go to now the substance of the Constitution, you realize that we have Article 17, specifically paragraph J, that gives the duty of every can all see me, right? Yes. Now not very tall, right? So when you read that particular article, it gives a duty of every citizen to create and protect a clean and healthy environment. So it's at the end of the day, the importance of this provision is that we have a right to participate, because it's not just a negative duty, it is a positive duty as well, that you must participate in the matters of your environment. So that's the duty that a citizen has. So this is also important when it comes to the aspects of access. So we must participate in aspects of what? Of the environment, and it's also very important, especially when it comes to genetic resources. So you, as a citizen, you have an obligation to make sure that you also participate issues to do with the environment, protecting it. So here the citizen is not just a natural human being alone, it includes companies. So companies that are investing in research, companies that are investing in terms of technology, and in most cases they end up exploiting some of the genetic resources. So they also have an obligation, however much that corporate entities and the citizens of Uganda, they have that obligation to make sure that they protect the environment and conserve it. So, and then at the end of the day, I'm going to be discussing the specific statutory instrument and other pieces of legislation that introduce some of the access rights and also the benefit sharing arrangements. And I'm going to marry them with the kind of submissions I'm making now. So also the Constitution, under Article 39, and also, okay, under Article 39 provides that the person is entitled, again, still, it's the same duty of the citizen to protect, and also you're entitled to a clean and healthy environment. So that is also Article 39 that provides for that right. Then the other aspects the other law that now we have to go through, it's one of the major principal laws when it comes to environmental management and conservation. That's the National Environment Act of 2019, but we all understand that there was an old act that was repealed and replaced by the 2019 Act, right? The reason why I'm making that statement is because we are going to be referring too much to a subsidiary piece of legislation called the National Environment Access Genetic Resources and Benefit Sharing Regulations that were made under that repealed law. So that's why I had to bring in that aspect that the current law replaced the old one. However much the old law is the source of that piece of statutory instrument that I'm going to be referring to. So when you look at the National Environment Act, there are two aspects that we're going to be looking at. One of them that it establishes that the pieces of obligations, rights, and so on, especially when it comes to the aspect of the environment, but also it establishes an institutional framework. So that institutions specifically that we're going to be looking at that are very important, especially when it comes to aspects of access and benefit sharing. Get me? Yeah. So some of the important provisions that you have to look at, especially when you're looking at the National Environment Act, is Section 3 of that same act that also entitles and also gives us obligations to create, promote, and protect a clean and healthy environment. And just like I said, this obligation is not just on natural human beings. It is also on companies that are also involved, especially when it comes to investment, that comes to exploitation of some of these natural resources and these genetic resources that we are going to be referring to over and over. So that's the importance of that provision and the obligation that it creates and also the rights that it does create. So then the other also section that is very important is section 5, subsection 2, paragraph A, that introduces the principle of public participation in environment making decisions. You see, the reason why you're going to see some of the principles behind access and benefit sharing arrangements is that people must participate. You get it? Public participation in matters of the environment. So when you look at access, the access itself gives you that the provision itself guarantees access. Then this provision itself also guarantees aspects to do with benefit sharing. Because when we're going to be looking at the concepts or some of the examples of benefit sharing, knowledge is one of them. Knowledge sharing is one of them, right? So at the end of the day, this provision itself emphasizes that aspect of public participation. We're going to be looking also at the aspects of right to access to information. When you're again looking at that, when you're reading again the piece of regulation that I just mentioned, you're going to see that that right is also very much emphasized in that piece of legislation. And the purpose of that is that the Constitution itself, including this provision of the National Environment Act, emphasize the aspect of public participation. So the communities, the indigenous people and the communities themselves, have several rights that I'm going to be discussing, especially when it comes to aspects of access and also when it comes to aspects of benefit sharing arrangements. So that's how important the aspect of public participation is, especially when it comes to affairs of conservation and also promoting a healthy and clean environment. So when you read section 62 rather, subsection 1 of the National Environment Act, it gives the authority. Now this is NEMA, gives the authority to make, with consultation rather, of relevant lead agencies, make regulations and prescribed measures for sustainable management and utilization of genetic resources of Uganda for the benefit of the people of Uganda. One thing that I never talked about is the aspect of natural resources being held in trust by the government. So at the end of the day, you realize that most of the institutions that we have that are established by the different laws, for example, NFA, wildlife, and all of those, they hold most of the resources on behalf of the people of Uganda, isn't it? So under this provision, it gives the powers to lead with consultation, obviously, with lead agencies to NEMA to come up with several regulations to facilitate access to genetic resources by Ugandans and by non-Ugandans. So that's the importance of that specific section. So specifically now, the other piece of legislation that is very important, we're moving in that order of the Constitution. Then we went to an act of parliament, which I've just been discussing. That's the National Environment Act. The other piece of legislation now made under the National Environment Act is the National Environment Act, in bracket, access to genetic resources and benefit sharing regulations of 2005. The key terms, it's one of the fundamental laws that we need to take keen interest in. One, because it is one of those specific laws that provide for benefit sharing and access. So the key terms that are defined by that law, one of them is the aspect of benefit sharing. So the question would be, what is benefit sharing? So it says that benefit sharing, also called sharing of benefits, is the sharing of benefits that accrue from the utilization of genetic resources. It includes technology transfer, innovations, practices, results of research, capacity building, community knowledge, awareness, and education. So that's the definition of benefit sharing. Okay, so that's the aspect that is also that is defined by that act, by the regulations themselves. The other aspect that we also need to be cognizant of is the application of this piece of regulation. When you read specifically regulation number 4 of that piece of legislation, it says that the regulation shall apply to access to genetic resources or parts of genetic resources, whether naturally occurring or naturalized, including genetic resources bred for or intended for commercial purposes within Uganda for export, whether in situ condition or ex situ condition. You understand these two terms, right? Okay, so if you do that, that's good. So they said that the regulation is obviously.
I don't understand.
Sorry?
I don't understand. Help me understand.
You don't understand genetic.
Okay. Yeah, when it comes, the issue to do with that in situ and ex situ. Yes, what we can talk about is that, sorry, yes, in and out. So if it is, if the animals, let us show the wild animals that are conserved in a national park, in that natural environment. You get it? Then if it is not, if the opposite is true, that's all I can say. The opposite of in situ is that any animal that is not
Not only animals, organisms.
organisms, yes. So I just gave it as an example. Yeah, sure. Then the other issue was on what? Genetics.
What is it?
So the definition is in the act, rather in the regulation.
Genetic resource. After building, you plan.
So genetic resources means genetic materials of actual or potential use or value and includes their derivative products and intangible components. So now I know you're going to ask me what are the genetic materials, right? So the genetic materials mean any material of a plant, animal, microbial, or other origin containing functional units of hereditary. Any other questions from them? I know we have scientists in the room.
Yeah.
Do we?
There are very many, sad.
Yes.
Everyone is so sad.
Yeah, I've been told to be a little bit fast. But when the reason why I wanted to talk about the applicability is that you realize that this piece of legislation introduces a licensing regime. But that licensing regime includes aspects to do with accessory rights or agreements that you must come up with if you want to do any kind of development, if you're developing any products, for example, if you're creating any innovation, you're supposed to have some sort of a license. So there's a licensing regime. But however, the reason why I want to emphasize this is that there are aspects that are not regulated under this law on a presumption that the community, most especially it relates with the communities, that the communities themselves should have that free will to access some of those resources without necessarily going through the handles of licensing, right? So some of the activities that are not covered here is that the regulation does not apply to the exchange of genetic resources where the exchange is done for local community among themselves and for their own consumption. You get it? So with that, you don't even have to go through the licensing regime or the aspects to do with, for example, coming up with material transfer agreements, coming up with access agreements and so on. So at the end of the day, so long as it is within the community, you don't have to go through that handle. How practical that is, I don't know, but that's what the law says.
So it is practical.
Well, so it also doesn't apply to the exchange where the exchange is certified to be purely for food or other consumptive purposes as prescribed by the relevant laws. Then also it doesn't apply to the transit of genetic resources through Uganda. The regulation also does not apply to access to genetic resources derived from plant breeders as defined by the law regarding breeding of plants. Usually this is now for research. Then also aspect to do with human resources. Also doesn't apply to approved research activities intended for educational purposes by Ugandan institutions recognized by competent authority, which do not result in access to genetic resources for commercial purposes or export to other countries. So, lastly, says that for avoidance of doubt, a license granted Okay, this was for just for the license only, but at the end of the day, you realize that the activities that are exempted from this kind of regulations, especially when it comes to the licensing bit of it. You get it? Yeah, so. Obviously, there are very many issues that when you read that piece of legislation, there are very many aspects that you find, especially the aspect that I talked about of access to information. It is something that is much emphasized. And when you go to the institutions, the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology, you'll find most of the information on that platform. Then also one hurdle that the regulations take away is the aspect of confidentiality. We have a problem in this country, by the way, when it comes to contracts between any government entity and a private entity, especially if they're doing any kind of investment. Most likely you're not going to have access to their documents because of some of the clauses that they will have there that these documents are confidential. So if they disclose them to any other person, including us here who have interest, such kind of documents, the government of Uganda will be presumed to have breached the contract, and therefore there is a fine. So for that matter, we're not going to give you access to these documents. But the law is very, very, very specific. That cannot be the case, especially when it comes to access to these documents. They are public documents that are supposed to be accessed. So if there is any agreement, especially when it comes to materials sharing agreements or access agreements, such and any other agreement between the government of Uganda and any other investor or any other researcher or any activity that has an impact on access and benefit sharing, the people or the public has a right to access those kind of documents. So that's how important that piece of legislation is. However, there's one also there's one component that is there that I need to emphasize is the aspect of the institutions that are established under this piece of legislation. One of them is the one that I just mentioned. That's the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology. However much it has its own act, it is established by another act of parliament. This piece of legislation gives it a mandate. And its mandate is provided for under Regulation 6 of the same regulations that I mentioned. And it spells out, some of them includes expeditious, they have a mandate to expeditiously process applications for access to genetic resources. So most of all the applications, especially that are made under these regulations, are made to Uganda, to that institution, that's the Uganda National Council of Research and Technology. So it has the mandate of approving most of the access applications that are made under these regulations. Again, it also has the mandate of facilitating the negotiation and conclusion of accessory and material transfer agreements, including the terms and conditions upon which the access is granted. But when you look beyond, the importance of this piece of legislation is that this is the technical institution that should be able to help indigenous people or the communities around these resources or where these resources are best to come up with the best benefit sharing agreements or arrangements. At the same time, also it also helps the people, especially to protect the communities when it comes to aspects of access. So that's the importance of it. So it has the mandate of facilitating the drafting, the reviewing, and negotiation of those pieces of those agreements, especially regarding to access and benefit sharing. So obviously there are very many lead agencies that I may not break. I may not break all of them. I may not break them down rather. But key among them, you realize that when you read the National Environment Act, you realize that they list a lot of lead agencies. One of them could be the NFA, the Wildlife Authority. There are very many that you can go on listing. So most of those those lead agencies also have a responsibility, especially when it comes to aspects of management and regulation of resources. And the provision is, when you read Regulation 7, some Regulation 1 talks about the importance and the role of some of the lead agencies, or all of the lead agencies. So we can talk about NEMA. We all know NEMA and its mandate. I don't have to go through that. So it's also one of the institutions that are provided for. So generally, in summary, the legal framework is, as you look at the Constitution. After the Constitution, you look at the National Environment Act. Then the very specific piece of regulation that provides for access and benefit sharing is the National Environment and Access to Genetic Resources Benefit Sharing Regulation of 2005 rather. So that's how brief the legal framework is. It's not as huge as most of other specific aspects of environment and conservation are. So with those few remarks, I don't know if there are few, because I've already received the notice that I need to summarize. So from me, that's it, unless there are specific questions that I must answer. I beg to take my seat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hindu, for that insightful presentation. I'll now open the discussion with you. It should be very brief because we are time back.
Is the discussion in the form of Q&A or?
Yes, any question? Any question?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your good knowledge. My name is David Mande, and I represent the Masobi Sugar Bennett community from Mount Kenya. You are the right person to give an answer to this, as from indigenous perspective, we understand from this previous presenter and knew that Uganda has not yet ratified to many conventions like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and others, that we think if Uganda ratifies, might save us and make us appreciate on the way of living. How and then, what shall we do for the government to assent that, to reorganize so that we really have to benefit on that? Number two is around the many severe punishments that the indigenous people are going through. From the perspective of Mount Elgon, we have not agreed anything with the government. The aspect of free, prior, and informed consent was introduced to us. And every day, the government through Uganda Wildlife Authority are continuing to extort monies from the community through impounding the animals that graze within some limitations of the protected area. And the community has even failed to appreciate the existence of some of these legal entities. Help us so that such heavy punishments are scrubbed. What do we do? Thank you.
Mine is, I'm called Topol Charles. I come from Karamoja. I'm one of the people who has walked a long journey. When Mr. Bachika was seeing me around, one question from the UN conference. What's an indigenous person? Then he also goes for his other debates. So I would like really to bring some contexts that I see our duty bearers
Good morning,
are not taking heed of.
Bambi. I have
Much
a
as
testimony.
the Bennett
Testimony.
had a court ruling
Nsigaye ndi ndayizeye
provide. The functionality
ubwo mbyumve nkora iki.
of that ruling has never taken shape. And that is why we see communities going even to the AU Human Rights Court. It means it beats our level of responses towards the legal provisions within our government. I would like to cite one of the examples that I see. The main core conflict we normally have and always blame each other lies generally on the land governance. In the Land Act, it spells very clearly that the 4 principles of 1, ownership, access, control, and utilizations. Once you deny a person such, that is not a right. It doesn't become a right, whether you are the best regime or the best spiritual leader in this world. I would like to cite one of the examples of what we call evictions in Uganda. A form of eviction has always taken shape right from the colonial era up to when even the post-independence era. Why? We had to compel government through court. We did also Benon Kisa go and refer to the ruling of Judge Musa. Miscellaneous Courts number 127 of 2016. I happen to be one of the deponents representing all the affidavits of Karamoja. We saw to it that Uganda lacked the basic principles governing evictions. Because if we talk about just rights, rights may just be words. But in terms of practice, what do? We are really putting part of the conditions that before an eviction is done, we needed the basic principles and guidelines on development-based evictions be shared with the affected community. And this is what we are not doing. Another element that we have ever identified that runs across every community. We may call it an indigenous affair. It is going to affect some of us who will claim we are not indigenous. Provided those standards and principles are not there. Now, from 2019 today, for me as being a deponent of that case, I'm also agreeing whether the government has designed eviction guidelines. Because it is based on a free, prior, informed consent. Whatever development is going to come, it has to come when you have consented. And then you are also supposed to be given. Now, which law is more than the other? I normally ask myself, which law in Uganda is more than the other? Because even the constitution sometimes can be argued in another way or the other in terms of practice. Currently, all conservation areas in Uganda are under tension. Oil exploration in Western Uganda is displacing all the animals to be translocated to other protected areas. So meaning there is a scaling up of game reserves to become game parks. And what does it mean? It means expansion, it means eviction, it means, so we have a lot of issues to be discussing while taking all this. And our region, Karamoja being full of animals, those were also called a zoo by the colonialists. I think everything will be brought there. And that is why subject to even the issue of eviction. That's why we are to turn against an investor called Dan Magal. He had come for gold. He never gave us, but only subjected the Karimojong people only to social corporate responsibility, which is just a voluntary one. A voluntary activity, you give or not, it's not binding. So part of the thing while we are discussing is we need to create spaces for further discussion on these issues. Otherwise, that is why we don't see things move well and all this and that. And another is, I like what you presented about possibly researchers. We are subject to people who are always taken not to be scientific. Traditional knowledge is a science in its sense, from time immemorial, being intricate and intrinsic to nature and godly things. We have the knowledge, that's why we have our languages. And I would like to attest in this conference that even the COVID-19 ingredient is only in Karamoja. So the issue of intellectual property right must always be recognized. We don't need this issue of, I'm from Makerere University. Did you plant anything there? Or from Oxford University. So what? We want also, respect of the intellectual property right. We have a lot of herbs that we know have been treating diseases from time immemorial, before Mulabo was even established. Did our communities die or no? We need at least open spaces for discussion. And we should always discuss what can benefit, I think, everybody. I think, I thank all of us, and I look forward that all development actors, we would like to come to the statement that Mr. Bachika used for giving us, for eating the floor. Documentation of traditional knowledge. In most of the tribes, whether communities, whether citizens, whether indigenous people, is very poor. We need to focus on that impact of concentration, and we need more support. And I still pray we give time for further engagement. I will not ask any question. I know whom to ask a question when it comes to Karamoja. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I'm not trying to take any other questions, but you can write blogs so that after one of our presenters from UWA wants to make this presentation very urgently. So I'll allow Mr. Miro to only answer those two questions. The rest of the questions you can note them down and I'll bring them here. I'll just pass them to you.
Yeah, quickly, what shall we do especially for the international experiments that we haven't ratified? The quick answer is we must mobilize ourselves and advocate for their ratification. Sometimes government has to be fully, and civil society is an actor in these spaces. Now that you're coming up with such kind of voices, yes, as people, we must push government to ratify this international experiments. Then the aspect of punishments, you're complaining about the hefty punishments. I know the one person is around. There are very many questions everywhere, especially when it comes to issues of coexistence of wildlife and human beings. Usually there's that conflict. I've never had an answer, but at least one common thing is that every time I'm in such a meeting, there is an officer from PUA. So I always direct that question back to them to answer. So that is also another lucky day that the PUA person is around, so most likely is going to answer that question. The issue of intellectual property that is stated is very, very, very important, especially when it comes to aspects of benefit sharing. This is something that we must emphasize. You see, most of these natural resources are being exploited, especially when it comes to the commercial bit of it. And then at the end of the day, the communities don't get anything, especially when it comes to the commercial bit of it. Because you see, people who want to patent these things, they're going to apply for trade secrets. Of them, those formulas, especially, for example, if you're talking about COVID-19, it's going to make sure it protects the trade secret. That's a trade secret. You get it, they're going to patent it. At the end of the day, you as a person, you may not necessarily again go and exploit. Yet, in most cases, there is no knowledge sharing avenue when it comes to the local communities. I can bet talked about that the key ingredient in the COVID-19 comes from Karamoja. The communities where that key ingredient is, I can assure you that they don't know the formulas of coming up with COVID-19. Get it? And someone is earning a lot of money from this patented invention that he has made. But there's nothing that comes to the local people, especially when it comes to the cost sharing benefits. Yet you have to compete with him, especially when you want to go and access the same herbs from those forests. You get it? So those are some of the aspects that indeed we must put too much emphasis on. I know there are very many other avenues, especially when it comes to cost to benefit sharing aspects, especially when it comes to now forestation and all of that. At the end of the day, that's a debate we can always have over and over. But me, I'm emphasizing the aspect of, I can always emphasize the aspect of access. I will always emphasize the aspect of benefit sharing. That's very important. Because at the end of the day, when these people exploit some of these resources and the communities are not gaining from the revenues that are being generated, you don't see, sometimes you may not even see the value why you should be conserving the environment for the benefit of others, right? You get it? So that point was very important, and that's why I had to comment on it, however much I was restricted to the 2 questions. Otherwise, thanks for being a very good audience. I've enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day and the rest of the discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mindo, for that wonderful, insightful presentation. So next on our agenda, we are going to have a presentation, the overview of benefit sharing arrangements by Mr. Richard Kapere, Uganda Wildlife Authority. Sir,
Yes, good morning, everyone. I hope the network is clear and I'm being heard. My name is on the screen, Richard Kapere. I do planning for Uganda Wildlife Authority. But before I go into the presentation, I want to just give a quick feedback to, I think, the question which I had about grazing and extortion of money and so forth. So for me, the answer I can give here is, one, that Uganda Wildlife Authority, we do not have any law that allows grazing in these protected areas, the national parks, the wildlife reserves. And as such, anybody that is grazing there, anybody that gets money from the grazer, anybody that pays money to this person, they are all subject of police and they should all be prisoned. That's the only answer I can give. I'll talk a little bit on benefit sharing, what is actually happening within Uganda Wildlife Authority, how we're sharing these resources. But allow me to first just give you a background of UWA. Please go to that screen that you have moved off. I know that we normally take it for granted that everybody knows who Uganda Wildlife Authority is, but also I know that some people don't actually know who Uganda Wildlife Authority is. Actually, people keep confusing us with WEC, the zoo in Entebbe, and that is surprising. So that's why I put that slide there, that we are a semi-autonomous statutory body established by Act of Parliament. And the reason we are created was to ensure sustainable management of wildlife and coordinate, monitor, and supervise activities related to wildlife management. We also have the legal mandate to conserve and manage wildlife in the country and enforce wildlife laws and regulations. Importantly also, which some people also don't know, number 5, is that we are also responsible for management of wildlife outside the formally gazetted protected areas. And in this case, we're talking of wildlife protected areas. So anything outside those areas, in terms of wildlife, in terms of animals, snakes, we are in charge. That's why we are in water, we are everywhere. So, and we are managing those few areas, the national parks, total wildlife reserves, as you can see on this map. This map is showing the parks, national parks. We have the wildlife reserves. We have the sanctuaries. Yeah, a number of them there. So that's how scattered we are in the whole of this country. And those other species, wildlife species that are outside these boundaries that you can see, we are also responsible. Next. This slide I had put there, but the previous presenter, I think, has talked about benefit sharing, what it is. And therefore, I think not needed to waste a lot of time on this. I think he has really talked about benefit sharing, what it is. So I don't think I need to go through this. Can we go to the next one? Okay. Now, what are the schemes that we have in UWA? Operational. Now, we have the cash-based schemes and the non-cash-based schemes. One of the common ones, which is very popular, is the revenue sharing scheme. This is 20% of gate collections. Anybody entering the national parks as a tourist pays a certain amount of money. 20% of that money is local government money. And I emphasize it is local government money. At a certain point, that money is calculated based on the formula that you can see there and is deposited on the account of a local government where that protected area is located. If it is located within several or 5 local governments, all of them will have a share based on that formula. And then it moves from the district account to the sub-county account until a project is implemented within the parish that is touching the boundary of the relevant protected area. So that is very clear, and that's what happens. And this money has actually done quite a lot in these local governments, because I don't want to choose, but most of the local governments now are depending on this revenue for a number of activities there. And the communities, those that are receiving quite some good money, are really enjoying these results of the project. This money does not go into people's pockets. It goes into do projects which have been agreed upon by the people in the guidance, of course, guided by the sub-county leadership and sometimes by Uganda Wildlife Authority. And there is a certain percent that remains at each of those steps for monitoring of these projects. The other type of cash benefit that does not go to all these other areas, it's only in areas which are hosting gorillas. That's what we call gorilla levy. We have 5% dollars. This is now in terms of the direct amount. From each permit that is sold, $5 is taken off to do projects of those communities living around these protected areas. And here we are talking about only Bwindi and Mugahinga. That's why we have gorillas. So unfortunately, some journalists look at the chimps and call them gorillas. Some look at baboons and also call them gorillas. Very unfortunate. Next. Now we have the non-cash benefit sharing schemes. And these, we call them the resource access programs, the resource access. Now, these are under the Community Conservation, which is a department within UWA. We operate this program and supports park community collaboration. Through signing of memoranda of understanding with selected local communities living adjacent the park to allow for regulated access. And I'm happy the previous presenter explained very well what it means by regulated access. You cannot, that's the reason behind the gazettement of some of these protected areas for purposes of accessing the resources, but in a regulated way. Otherwise, then you have nothing in the next 1 month or two if you don't regulate access. And that's why we normally have problems. People fighting that they want to eat whatever is there today and they forget about tomorrow. So UWA is there to regulate access. And these resources, such as firewood, fish, honey, poles, grass, herbs, among others. You know, people look at these as small things, but to a local person living around these protected areas, that's livelihood. People depend on this. Even in Kampala, people are still depending on firewood, imagine. So these resources are very important, and these areas are conserved. Who is managing? Only trust for the people of Uganda, as the land person who presented earlier said. It's just because we want to regulate that people get these resources, they access them, but regulated, so that even our children, our grandchildren are able to access these resources. And so this is something that is very also important. And all the protected areas, we have these MOUs that are signed after negotiation. People come to our field staff, if they have a resource that they require, they go through a process of negotiation, but of course we first verify how much is available and how much can be taken out. And then we enter into the agreement. At what time do you pick, when, what do you take, things of that nature, and we move on. The purpose of the resource access program is to allow communities access resources, which I've already said this one, so as to reduce conflicts within communities and create participation in park management and change the negative attitude towards the park. And this will subsequently enhance conservation of park resources. This is just to emphasize what I've already mentioned. We have now moved a step further to do economic evaluation of these resources that people pick. And if someone is carrying a headload, doesn't quickly come to his or to the bypass of the stand to the person standing on the side, that the person is carrying maybe 10 million or 1 million or 2 million on his head. So we have calculated that, and we have in some places we have the data, and it's quite interesting, quite a lot of money that we are giving out in the form of these resources. Next. Other benefits. Interestingly, people don't look at these areas. Okay, they only look at these areas in terms of the other things I've just talked about. And people start asking us, how about the parishes that don't live close to these protected areas, and yet they are suffering. Oh, these parks were created for the benefit of people of Uganda. Why are you not looking at these ones who are very close? Now, we have a number of other benefits, which I've mentioned here. Enterprise development, the opportunities to develop wildlife-related or best enterprises and the business that can benefit the people. Anybody who is willing or he has some resources and can invest in these areas, you are welcome. The opportunities are there. That's why these areas are being conserved. Creation of jobs and employment. Jobs, employment. Well-developed and protected parks provide jobs, both directly and indirectly. We are at a level of employing about 3,000 staff to protect and manage these areas. And these are recruited from local communities. I know there are questions around, for example, the recent recruitment that we did for the lower cadres. That, okay, some districts didn't get, this one didn't get, but eventually, even if one didn't get, but in total, the people who are there, who were recruited, are Ugandans. That's the most important. And so these resources are there for these opportunities, and when these people get money, get salaries or whatever, they go and they develop their areas and their people. The third, development of local economies. Properly managed parks make direct contribution to local and national economies. And that's what I'm talking about, the salaries of our staff, local service tax. You cannot believe me, I'm still paying local service tax where I'm staying, not in my village where I come from, but where I stay when working, I pay that tax goes there and it's developing. For example, I stay in Wakiso. So that tax that I'm paying, local service tax, is developing Wakiso. That is the resource. That is something coming out of the conservation of these protected areas where I am employed. Number 4, infrastructure development. Well-developed parks establish infrastructure for management and tourism that may be beneficial to the communities. Through corporate social responsibilities, parks may provide facilities like schools, health centers, and other things that we have done. We have done quite a number of these social corporate responsibility activities to the people in these areas. Provision facilities for public use, water, enjoyment, and other things. If these areas were not conserved, this water that we are talking about wouldn't be there. This is climate change we're talking about. We are protecting areas which are carbon sinks. That's why we have been in Dubai discussing how these developed countries should really help us. But we are here because as developing countries, we have protected these areas which are carbon sinks that are helping regulate these bad gases in the atmosphere. And that is a reason, that's the reason why this conservation should continue. Not only in the protected areas, but even outside these protected areas. Everybody should conserve whatever he or she has for the future of his or her family. Next. Continue. Continue. There. So this is again, no, back. This is again real expanding on other benefits that we are talking about for the local economy, of the importance of conservation as a way of schemes that people are getting out of conserving these areas, which can also call benefit sharing. Because if the government is hiring guides, is hiring wardens, is improving these access sharing resources, we are paying wages, all of that money is going into the economy. And if there is a construction of a road, everybody benefits from that road. Because tourism now, I think, is now the first or the second income earner for the country. The exchange, in terms of bringing exchange, foreign exchange. So this is really very important, and we should all embrace. Now, when I hear people talking about Batwa were removed from the forest and they want to go back to the forest, well, I don't want to talk much about that. I know it's something that is in court, but for me, we will be looking at how can we improve the people's lives, these people's lives outside these, staying in these protected areas, in these forests. We are not animals. These are human beings who should be developed like any other, not advocating for them to go back into these areas that everybody now is benefiting from. Next, I think I'm about to finish. Next. Yes, this is just pictures that shows, it shows these are the simple resources that people seem to be picking from these areas, but they are not simple as such. This is the livelihood. People are depending on this. Without this, you can have serious wars. Someone is carrying papyrus there. That is the livelihood. Somebody is carrying firewood. That is livelihood. Somebody is carrying grass. That is searching. No, there is beehives. We are everybody here now. These days we don't want to take sugar. We want to take honey. I'm sure somebody take with that cup I'm seeing maybe has put the honey there. So all these things are there. They can be accessed by everyone, but for them to survive one generation to the other, there must be regulated access. And that's why we are there as an institution of government to manage that access. So I think if you got the last, I think should be the last. Thank you very much. That's what I could do quickly put up, but I hope people have understood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for that wonderful presentation on the global beneficiary arrangements. I'll now open the discussion to the audience. If you have any questions for him.
Thank you very much. Mr. Richard, I have a simple question for you around cash-based scheme benefit sharing. You ably told us that there's a 20% money that is calculated from the gate collections, maybe those national parks, and this one goes to local government. And then you also say that that money is channeled to the sub-county and lastly to the parish. That's where this natural setup is. Now, I kept on wondering that 20%, as the money is moving from one level to another, are there deductions that come along with that? And at the end of the day, these grassroots communities actually get the 20%. I would also like you to give us examples of some of those projects that are established at community level. Thank you so much.
Asante sana. Thank you so much, Mr. Richard. I also have some concerns for you. Again, my name is David Mande from the Bennett community, where it's failing. Okay, it's now catching signal. On the 20%, it has been long ever since you kept giving communities 20%. Can we do a 50-50? You're not telling us where all the 80% goes. These benefits come from our heritage, our resource we once occupied there. Can you give them back from 50%? Can you give the Bennett's 50% from Mount Elko? Why do you give the 20%? Even the 20% is far less insufficient, and we have to amend something to come to 50-50 benefit. I also want to ask you, why do your rangers continue killing, shoot to kill unarmed civilians? It's very rampant. For the case of the Bennett's, Kamagede died. His wife is a widow. children are not going to school, poor did nothing. Even be thinking of sponsoring, whereas we appreciate the message of conservation. Is there any law that permits your rangers shoot to kill? Now that you have even rapped to me on the cattle grazing issue, when we don't have a formalized boundary, when we are still on the temporal settlements. So you need to help me more on that. And why do the rangers continue to cut people's crops, destroy even on their small plots of land that were truly allocated by government? It's happening, and you know about this. That make me happy. Now, I also want to, you attended COP28, and the message on behalf of the indigenous people was, without recognizing the rights of the indigenous people, the message on climate change might be meaningless. And so we're asking you to pay detailed attention and customize the rights of indigenous people, even in joint conservation. We also, I will tell you, your rangers down there are also they are very lax. There is a lot of laxity. The indigenous knowledge of conservation for fauna and flora was the best way. Can we integrate and have this run together? Thank you very much. Lastly, we are requesting for a training field up at a higher elevation, slightly above 2,800 meters above sea level, because the higher the elevation, the better the access. We have very many stateless people from the indigenous community of the Bennets, Massaubisho, Mount Elgon. All of them bring a lot of gold at international forum platform for Uganda. But if they can only train far much higher at Kapimi, and those are the ranges in Mount Elgon, we can have a very robust development for the athlete. Think about that, and we pray you help us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bwana Kapele. My name is Bakari Philip. I have one or two observations. One, we are talking about rights, we are talking about inclusivity, we are talking about livelihood. Those communities agree on the 20%, or you coerce them to agree. Yes, they are the owners of the property. Point number two, where does the 80% go? Would you give us a calculation? Because you're talking about social accountability as the state actors versus the owners of the property. Where does the 80% go? And the very last one is about in your last statement of cost benefit regulation. At what level do you regulate the involvement? Because the livelihood, that natural resource, every gender has its own way of doing things. The youth have their own benefits. The children have their own benefits. The women and the elder in terms of livelihood. What the women want to do or get from the natural resource is different from what the young people would desire. So in your regulatory approach, at what level do you create a balance in terms of access and getting what they desire for the young people, for the women, for the children, the disability, because they cannot be at the same level. You give us just those pictures of people, papyrus, firewood, and who owns what?
Can I first answer this in case there are others?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you for those that have asked the questions. I will clarify where I can, but they seem to be almost similar. The first person who asked, the lady, I didn't get the names. The 20%, at every level, these are only two levels we are talking about. We have, if we pay like 30 million, now calculators, people with calculations, please, those who know mathematics. If we pay like 30 million to change your district, for example, 5% of the 30 million will remain at the district to enable the leaders to do monitoring later. 5% of the 30 million. Now, the balance of that money will go to the sub-counties, which are supposed to be beneficiaries on that revenue. Each of those, depending on the amount that has gone to, if there are two sub-counties, then you divide the balance of the 5% of the 30 million when you have removed the 5%. Each of those sub-counties will only remain with another 5% for monitoring. The rest of the money will do the project for which they have been approved to do. Okay? So basically, it's quite some good amount of money will do the projects. The projects that are done, in the past, there used to be quite, it was not conditional. Now this money has been made a condition. So in the past, people would buy like a goats and what and so forth, and then eventually the goats would end up being eaten on Christmas. But now it is conditional. You have to do projects that are related to, that can have a relationship with conservation, livelihood improvement, because maybe because of wildlife, people are losing their livelihoods, then you have to do certain things that can improve that. For example, you can do schools. We have had a number of schools that we have supported in a number of districts. I can't easily give examples now. You can do trenches, elephant trenches, because these are the ones that will stop elephants from coming to eat your crops. And eventually, you'll harvest your crops. You know, those kind of projects that have a bearing on the survival of the communities when the wildlife is not disturbing them. I'm trying to bring these things at simple language. But I saw somebody like Murunjo or something from Ruberizi. She can give testimony on how the people there have used the revenue sharing amount of money and the number of projects that have come up, and how this has helped to improve the lives of the people there. Let me combine this, I think, with the last person who is talking about whether the 20% was an agreement with the people and so forth. Colleague, I want to tell you that Uganda Wildlife Authority is not the authority that came up with 20%. We were given the 20% to implement. This is a law issue, it's a parliament issue. And that's why we normally tell the people, whenever we go, people say, can you increase 20%? We don't have the powers as UWA. It is, you are members of parliament with powers to increase the 20%. They are the ones who enacted that. It is in the law. That's why we are saying that money is for local government. We have now no authority over it. Once we get it, we just give it out at a certain time. Our offices are always open. The books are open. Anybody wanting to look at how that money has been calculated is always welcome. We normally, if we don't have enough to give out, we talk to the local governments and we agree. We can declare, we say, okay, we have maybe like that period of COVID, maybe we have only 500,000, and we agree. Would you really want this money to come to your account, or you wait for it to accumulate and then we give it at once? We agree. If they don't agree, we give them the money. So this is transparency. So you can come to get, look at the books, see how many people entered, how much they paid, what's the 20% of that, and then you are able to satisfy yourself. On what you talked about the resources, youth have the ways of how they want to use the resources, the disabled and so forth. That is true. But as I said, we are there to regulate access of those resources. And that means it is demand driven. Uganda Welfare Authority is not going to come to the people, to the youth and say, hey, here we have polls, can you come and cut polls? No. It is the people who want those resources to come and put forward their reasons in writing, and then we do the evaluation, and then we're able to agree that yes, what you want is available in this quantity, and this is how you'll get it. And then we have an MOU signed between us and the groups that are interested. And later on, we follow that in terms of how efficiently are using these resources. Because we don't want to give you if you have taken polls and then the time we come there to see whether you actually built the house, the polls are actually rotting. So we do that training, that follow-up, to say, okay, take this, but this is how we should efficiently make use of that. That's why now we have moved to communities around these project areas, and we are supporting them with the energy saving stoves, for example, so that if we give them firewood, the head load does not last only 1 week until it's finished, and the person wants to come back to the forest. If you give a head load and you're using the efficient stoves, you're able to use it for quite some good weeks. And we're getting testimonies of that. So that's how we are moving on with the regulation of those resources. The key word is regulated access. And sometimes I hear people saying, you know, in the national park, you are not supposed to do anything. It is complete protection. That is completely wrong. People can access, but regulated. The second person who asked from Bennett, my colleague, I think I may not go into issues of Mount Elgon. Mount Elgon has a lot of issues. They're giving us headache, but to their disadvantage. Because if people really would know the importance of Mount Elgon, they wouldn't be giving us headache. Because if by now who was not there, that forest wouldn't be there by now. And you can see the problem we're getting even when we are there. So when you talk about rangers killing, there's no law that allows anybody to kill a person. If anybody has killed, take that person to police. That's the work of the police. But I can also tell you the other way that we have lost a lot of rangers there when they're actually protecting, conserving your own resources. So really, there is a need to balance some of the things. The ranger was not born there. He's just there and he's deployed there and he's trying to protect your resource. How come you want to kill the person? So if there's an exchange of fire, definitely there are losses. And if people lose lives, that is the result. But if someone comes and just kills, then that is a police action. So there, I don't want to go that side, but I know Elgon will have a lot of issues, and you actually even lost the carbon project because of that, which would have benefited the people there. Otherwise, there are certain things. I think there is a network where it went off, and I didn't get some of the things you talked about. Cutting crops. Of course, I don't think that rangers cut crops when they are not grown inside the park boundaries. And you have a problem there. I will tell you this. Where you want to bribe some of the members, some of the staff, and you have to know that yes, if I get if you get a staff who is badly behaved and you bribe that person, and tomorrow that person is transferred and another one comes, definitely you don't expect the same behavior. So if somebody allowed you to grow crops in the park through that bad practice, another one comes and cuts them off, definitely you blame yourselves. Like what happened in Elgon, I can tell you this because I've been planning, I've been in that area. In the past, people did bribe the surveyors and they changed the boundaries of this park without changing the coordinates that are deposited in Entebbe. So when we got another surveyor and went direct and opened very well, then you get those issues of, 93 bar. These are problems caused by you people there. So really, we should be genuine to ourselves. We're Uganda. This is our Ugandan resources. I think I didn't get the others, but they're in the same line. I had something a little bit network went off when talking about the athletics. I think something like sports. But what I know is that we have a sports ground, we have a sports facility that we have opened up there to help the athletes there, because you know that people who do running, most of them come from that region. So that's why we opened that high altitude sports center. So I don't know whether it was in that line, but that facility is there, and I think it is almost complete. Yes, I think that's what I can say. I wanted to run. I have an appointment. I don't know if there's any other question that's different from what people have asked now. Thank you.
Anyone who have everybody question one?
Chair,
Let's give a question to also
we need to speak for the judge.
that's a question.
Winfred, can you please unmute and speak? Is she there? Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, I have poor network, but I had commented on, had written on the chat group. However, I can repeat them. Thank you so much for the good presentations, both from the legal framework plus the presentation on access and benefit sharing. My two issues were concerning the issue on access and benefit sharing, whereby most of these communities, the indigenous communities, most especially the Batwa, complain about lack of enough resources, important resources that they can access from these forests. And most especially, anyway, that is those ones who have access, because as Mr. Kapele has said, the access is there, but it's not a free access, it's limited. So even the limited access, they complain that the most important resources are not there, are lost, are no longer in place. So my concern was, if we are talking about access, what are these people going to access? Among the listed resources to access, if those ones that they would need more because they have priorities, what measures are being taken to restore these resources? Then secondly, on sharing, we've talked about sharing, and most of you have mentioned and highlighted that although the sharing is there, majority of these indigenous peoples, they lose out. Firstly, they are not aware of what all this is about. We talk about agreements, we talk about benefiting. For example, if the money goes to the sub-counties, the sub-counties are constructing maybe roads or rehabilitating the hospitals, etc. But you find a poor person, an indigenous person, hungry and poor, will not understand that constructed road came out from the 20% that was meant for the people to benefit from. So it's really hard to convince them. Thus, I was requesting that if it's possible, if it can be put into consideration, at least these people are given a special consideration as former inhabitants of these lands, as people who have lost their livelihoods, as people who are suffering, who are poor, at least even if something comes out to the community, there is a special consideration for them that they can realize that from their lands, at least something is coming out, not generalizing them in the entire community, whereby you find even those who are benefiting are not the ones who have lost their lands. Thank you.
Okay, can I answer that quickly, and Iran? Okay. The resources not being there. Definitely, if the resources are not there, then what do you want us to do? We can only work together and ensure that we pick them wherever they are and replicate them. I mean, replicate them. But there is nothing that is listed. I had something like listed. No, we don't list the required resources. As I told you, this demand driven. What is only listed, I can say listed, are those that are prohibited. We cannot allow hunting. We cannot allow timber in terms of the timber, the wood that you get for building your house. Those two, I can say they are listed because they are not allowed in the law. But all the others, depending on what you want, you come and we talk. If they are not in the zones that have been zoned, that area which have been zoned for collaborative resource management, there are special permissions that we give that you can access the resource that you want deep inside these protected areas. The other thing of not being aware, this is, we are looking at one community. Uganda Wildlife Authority is not working in isolation. That's why you are there as NGOs, you are there as local governments. This is, hello, are you still listening to me?
Yes.
Yes, this is a joint Luvimbi, I can say. Do your part, make them aware of what is available if you have the capacity. Then as also do our work. Then come to us and we agree on what to do. Don't say that, you know, the indigenous people are not aware and who are the other should make them aware. No, you also do your part. Go to them, sensitize them, give them whatever is required to understand what's going on, so that we are working together as one community for the best of our people. And I can tell you that we have special affirmative programs, especially for the Batwa. If you go to Mugahinga, you know that we are running a trail with them. They are the ones doing interpretation. They are getting a lot of money from that activity. We are now going to do, to document sites of interest in Bwindi and Mugahinga, the hubs that they used to have. We want to write that together with them. All these are projects that we are doing with them. So there are certain affirmative actions that are already being done, but we should take it not like leaving it one authority, one institution of government. Let's take it together, fundraise for some money, do some work with them, bring them to us, and we discuss what we are having both doing our, we are seen as doing our work as government of Uganda. I think allow me to stop there, and thank you everybody. Let me catch up with my other appointments.
The issue of land censoring, that's good.
I realize most of us have questions for you, but I think we can note them, give them to the secretariat, and we shall find a way.
Yeah, then you will take it directly.
Yes, yes.
The section one is this benefit, so the 20% that is sent from Uganda Wildlife Authority has always been the money that district officials corrupt, because they want to follow within the budget cycle, whereby all the money that is contributed and the rest goes under integrated financial management system. It goes back to the center, reaching to the district. You even don't know how they normally procure their processes. So the district procurement and disposal unit is not allowed by law to make just a separate project. Maybe it is because of this. He has to come in tandem with the district plan. So this money has always been subject to corruption and embezzlement because we have Kamokan being run by five LC5s that they are just a committee. Then we have Upuchwa, that is Pianaupe Community Wildlife Association, being run by 3 LC5s. So, and they are the ones where the money is always remitted. How does that money really go? We don't see it coming out because we wanted them to begin controlling when should they disburse the money so that the money can only end up in the center, maybe at the Bank of Uganda. Then it is remitted to districts as a contribution of Uganda Wildlife Authority. Then it is disclosed by the accounting officer.
What's the current budget? Sorry, I thought that's what is happening. What is the how is the money dispersed at the moment?
Currently, at the moment, we had a project coming to Hooper Primary School of solar panels, and it was just brought by a nephew of the LC5 as a contractor. It was not even procured by the district. So how does the money leave Kidepo goes through LC5? The procurement process is not clear, and you just only see someone come to school and only get the head teacher that we have a benefit from Kidepo Valley National Park. We want to install a solar. Under the PPDA Act, that is not the form of approach we need to be using. And that's why we even told them, did the engineer verify the quality of the services that were approved? So those are part of the processes. You can release the money, but the process itself cannot be as clean as it's supposed to be.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm not working with you. I work with government. That's why I'm taking interest in this. To the best of my knowledge, this money is sent to the governments and received in the district of funds. And then priorities are made by respective governments on how to get the money. Now, what is being raised, I think, even government the mandate of what was for them once they released. How the money is used and those other internal processes now is external to them. For them, they will say, we've released so much to this district. And I remember I am on another project where we have wildlife because the protected areas where we even see checks being carried over the districts. Now, it may be that because it is not going through the other processes, maybe it's not what happened. That it is used, which would now mean that we need to have another forum of engaging these concerned of governments to ensure that when they receive, the due processes are followed. And now that also brings in the indigenous communities who may even miss out in the current arrangement, because one will say, okay, they are going to put up this road or a school, and how many of them were in these schools? And if we are talking about other issues, they eat and the rest. So we need to because it may be that for them thank you.
Who works for government, such as the government. This formed by what government is meant to do in totality at all local governments, and the extra money of these communities who could benefit from this natural resource. I think that's very, very important. Let us not treat these communities like any other generic local government. I think these communities need better, because once the money from the government in the local government setting through their programmatic planning to have services extended to them, but they should be treated with extra less, because they also have a natural resource where they must benefit from. And like my colleague from Karamoja said, when you look at the procurement process that local government, it is purely in three sets. It's either in works, or supplies, or services. And at the level of planning, we are aware that any monies collected by the local authority comes back to the center. There is dispersed to projects. But again, this money is not collected by the local authority where these indigenous activities are. It is an extra money which comes again from the government agency that is worldwide authority. So our interest in this, our ask would be, because at the end of the day, we want to see enhanced livelihoods, enhanced development within these local communities, because they have that rich natural resource which they must benefit from. So in our treatment, we need to dig deeper for us to create a balance on how these core benefits are being shared, so that we go, when you move to these people, ideally, you see that their livelihood is not in any way enhanced, yet they have a natural resource. So our conversation should take deeper that level, and we see the question of the balance. I see a lot of policy advocacy here. We really need to do more. But other than us simply, we are not here to have sites win, but I think there is a lot of policy advocacy coming right from the policy instrument of the 80, like he said. Then at what level do they have specifics that whether that 20% is going to address works, supplies, and services? At the end of the day, these communities deserve better.
Can I testify to that? I'll testify to that. Team, I have a testimony that in 2017 I benefited from revenue sharing from Uganda Wildlife Authority to a tune of 2.68 million, 2,668,000 Uganda shillings. And as I came from college, I get to community, I take interest in appearing. So I formed my local group and used a traditional behind, and then I don't know who saw, and I was really encouraged. It was kind of being a schemer or technical. I was advised to register a group formally. So the group gets registered, and I ordered from Queen District and come to Mount Elgon National Park Regional Office in Valley. I submit the group. That was in 2016. And so it took a couple months. So in 2017, revenue sharing comes through the district, and the UWA team comes with a check bearing the group, my group name, and other colleagues who are already in conservation-related project. So this thing is possible. It works out. All you need to do, position yourself probably and very many indigenous communities do not know, because even those at the district, they keep tipping their relatives who are staying at Delta International Park. This can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And the thing goes silent. People don't have access to information to this thing. But I'm telling you, I have ever benefited. Today in 2023, I back hunted. I have about 210 beehives. And of course, Mount Helicon honey is always the best because of the 72 medicinal herbs that bees get their forage and nectar. And my honey sometimes goes to Greater Masaka and some parts of Kampala. So you carry next time, Peter.
Have one last year.
Thank you very much. I crave your indulgence, Madam Chair, that I am slated to be on the panel discussion next session. I also have so I have had the discussion, and this is like being in a parent meeting. Almost all the lamentations coming are like coming straight from Nigerian participants. And it appears that we all have the same problem. So my name is Fuzi Michelia. I am based in Abuja. I used to be a lawyer, and now I'm a tailor, and I'm doing some other issues. I came here for a private visit, but since it coincided with this meeting, my friend Chika, who for some very strange reason has some very strong influence over practice. So it's a privilege being here, and I want to really thank you for the opportunity to be part of this meeting. So, just a quick reflections on the issues that we discussed. And for the beginning, the legal framework that has been presented appears to be straight from the Nigerian law book 2, the national regulation on access and benefit sharing. You have your one in 2005. We have similar regulation in 2009, which basically was established by the National Regulatory Agency, which, and as you recall, that was before the adoption of the Nagoya Protocol in 2018. So that regulation had been in existence, but now the Nagoya came into effect. We have a focal point. Unfortunately, the focal point doesn't have the kind of political cloud to put all of the structures. So I was really looking forward to hearing what had happened in terms of the implementation. But on some of the issues that have come up, statutory issues can only be dealt or can only be addressed with an amendment from Parliament. The gentleman from the wildlife had said that the 20% is statutory to the local government. And therefore, there is nothing anybody can do except the Parliament. So I think there should be different level of intervention from different categories of stakeholders here. If you are from a community and you feel that that 20% does not address your requirement, or is not equitable, or there is no transparency in its management, then of course the only thing you need to do is set up an agenda to see how you can influence Parliament to do that. And Parliament can actually address your issue if you come with strong justification. I will give you an instance. In the current Nigerian industry bill that just came into being in 2021, there is a provision for host community funds, trust fund, meaning those communities from which oil companies are operating are entitled to a certain percentage of the company's earning in the previous year. And that percentage was initially put at 3%. So this community embarked on a very strong campaign and actually made so much that's went to the Parliament. And just last year, that percentage was increased from 5%, from 3% to 5%. So I think there is always a window to adjust this. But first, you need to find out what are the gaps, what are your justification, and you need to also determine those in the Parliament that feel so strongly about this kind of issue that you can influence so that you can get the appropriate and Other issues, I think, examples from Nigeria that I would like to bring specifically on benefit sharing is the one that had been established under the Mining Act 2007. And it makes it very mandatory now that there must be what is called community development agreements between the host community and whoever is a licensed either company or miner that wants to operate in that community. And that agreement must be based on a community development program. And this is mandatory. So the community agrees on what are the issues that will go into the program. What was the community? Is it health? Is it education? Is it access to it? Is it a capacity building? And once these are identified and documented in some kind of program, then an agreement is signed. And those agreement clearly states what comes to the community and how those will be actually implemented. So the other that brings me to the issue of monitoring. If we keep saying the government gives money and this money are not transparently being managed, then of course we need to have some kind of advocacy on having very strong kind of monitoring and tracking system. In the case of Nigeria for its oil, I think there must be some extractive industry transparency initiative that normally tracks the earnings from all oil producing companies. They check their books, they also make report on an annual basis. And of course, naturally, this never comes, they never add up because there are so many issues like the friend said, the issue of lack of transparency, the issue of corruption. This you can never tell in an African context, it's always there. But you need to try to do as much as possible reduce this the minimum to the minimum to variable minimum. Then the last one about this issue of trying to get social inclusion, getting everybody involved to be part of the system. Trust me, it will never happen because this cliche about leaving no one behind, for me personally, and some people deliberately want to be left behind. Because if everybody is carried along, sometimes the people around this table might lose their jobs if everybody is on the bandwagon. So the issue of leaving no one behind, I think is just an overrated cliche, but we need to advocate for taking a high significant number of people to be on the right side. You can't take everybody, but even the Bible, I think, says the poor will remain with you. So I think we need to just try as much as possible. Get those people that we think they are strongly aligned to what we need, try to get them on our side and get a very robust advocacy plan to so thank you very much for this opportunity, and I think it's a good session. The conversation needs to be and I think the next round of conversation you are having like this, I would crave your indulgence to involve and invite the parliamentarians. It is important to get those making laws to be part of this discussion. They might not come all of them, but trust me, there are some people that feel so strongly about this. And if you get them to understand the reason, they may be your champion. So I think it's important to identify those in parliament that feel so strongly about these issues and then take them up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuzi. It's very interesting to know that we are not alone. We have similar programs with Nigeria. Thank you for sharing Nigeria's perspective and sorry to share experiences and good practices. So the next on our agenda, we are going to have a break. We are going to have a good photo. And maybe those who have not yet had an opportunity to have tea, you can go to tea. Then after that, we shall delve into our panel, which is going to be moderated by Robert Kubiachira from Environment Shield.
I'd like to guide, if you mind, before we have our panel, the group panel. Sorry, no, we can't. I'd like to suggest projects. Our Mr. Wizards already alerted us once we, so I would like to suggest that we have, one team, but also the panel that we engage just briefly because we shall be moving through what has already been highlighted by Mr. Richard, so that we can be able to proceed in the interest of time. I don't know if it is agreeable by all of us because I am very, very time efficient and I would like us to minimize time. Start from there, we can have a group photo that if you don't mind. Is that agreeable to all of us? We shall have a panel only 40 minutes. So allow me kindly to invite my panelists, distinguished panelists. I have been represented by Mr. Machika, my senior. That was the group photo. I didn't want us to say, but then I'm going to you. Okay, so things I have been overruled. Adrian, I can see you also smiling. I wanted to say. Okay, we can go to group photo. I hope that we shall be able to reconvene. Okay, let's go to group photo. Jalia. Okay, group photo, then we'll come and reconvene. Thank you. Thank you so much. What do you want to see? The moment we lose this, want me to be good.
Now, the way you almost arrested all of us. You almost arrested all of us.
This one is online. Hey. Yes. Okay, so please organize that. You know, I wanted to arrest people here. I wanted to make sure we don't lose the momentum.
Next thing is this is
But of course, what about them? Interesting discussion. When I was in the environment. You can move without my family. Yes. Moving over. So where is the yes, Mr. Moderator, come. Yes, please. Now, you don't mind the around so we have But actually, very good icebreaker. I think I underestimated it. It was very necessary, especially. I like the way the cameraman was almost walking into the main road. Yes. Okay, but that was really good. So let's have a cup of tea. Those who are a cup of tea, and let us settle. So we need some extra 2 minutes for us to reconvene because we are going to have a panel of only 30 minutes. That we're able to catch up with the rest of the day. Those who are outside, kindly please walk in. We want to have a full house. And this panel is very, very, very interesting because we are going to, it is a hybrid panel involving people from the grassroots, from the indigenous ethnic minorities. We have somebody from the academia. So it's really a very, very, very enriching panel that we can't wait to have. Thank you. Some 1 or 2 minutes that we can all convene. One of these is just so clear. Okay, thank you so much. I've been consulting with my technical team. We already have people online. Our online audience, we salute you. Sorry, we are not joining you for the cup of tea where you are, but we're also having a cup of tea here. I am reliably informed that one of our panelists is already online, Dr. Nyakugaba is already online, Dr. Patrick Nyakugaba from Makerere University, and also my good friend Ogira Charles is already also online from Karamoja. It's also already online. So let's all this that we can be able to kick off. Meanwhile, I'm going to request my panelists who are already here. Mr. Ndaya, I don't know whether to speak the name very well. Let me call him Elia for purposes of not together, but he's from the United Organization for the Batwa Development in Uganda. Mr. Ndayamba Chimana. Mr. Ndayamba Chimana. Yes, Elia. Elia, I'll keep it with Elia so that I don't really bite my tongue. The name we can see is botanics. So, Elia, please kindly take the seat. Take your seat on the in front. Please take a continue my panelists. Please give him a round of applause from the United Organization for the Cultural Development in Uganda, which is the UBUDU. Very good. Thank you. I will also, since we have the other two panelists who are online, I will also request Council Muhindo for purposes of you may take the seat there because I may also throw you something to do with the legal one. Please kindly sit there because now I'm using my my powers. I want to put you in the hot seat because this thing is the current. I know you have made a very good presentation, but I want to point out some of the. I was looking at your presentation, and I may ask you one or two things, but kindly please, he's Mr. Muhindo Morgan from Cheese and Meat Advocates, and he earlier made a presentation. I've requested him to sit there so we can balance the panel. My friend here, I don't want him to be lonely. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Robert Yachira. Those who have been following the work that we do, I am the Deputy Executive Director at Environment Shield. I am the award-winning human rights defender of the year 2022, and I also chair the Technical Thematic Working Group at the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders. I also coordinate the Environmental Defenders Network in Uganda. So I am very privileged to actually moderate this panel of two people online, but also the one that we have in the house. But all of us shall be panelists. So I'll start it off. I want to kick off with Elia, who is here, so that my panelists online can be getting set. Our online audience, you're most welcome to this session.
we shall be looking at the overview of the benefit sharing arrangements, and shall be able to unpack some of the comments and remarks from Mr. Kapere, Richard from Uganda Wildlife Authority, but also we shall be able to bring into some bit of legal issues, because it is very, very important. And I'll start it off by allowing Elia to have a minute of introduction, then I will flip back to my online audience. Please give him a microphone. Elia to introduce himself. He's from the United organization from the Batwa Development in Uganda. Please have a microphone. Briefly introduce yourself and the work that you do just briefly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elia Ndayambashimana. I act and also work with the United Organization Department of Development in Uganda. And I am like the ambassador of the Batwa people in Kisoro in particular. I'm very happy to be here. Very happy that Emily is always thinking about us and thinking about me in particular. This is my third session with the Emily team. I'm very glad that you are thinking about us and you want to transform our lives and transform. Go back there.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll give you another minute to actually talk about the work that you do. You're most welcome. Please welcome all the way from Kisoro, Chicken Region. Our colleagues, our panelists online, I'm going to start with the doctor. I hope the doctor is already in. Dr. Patrick Byakagaba is from Makerere University, and as I said, my panel is a hybrid panel, moving from Elia to now Dr. Patrick, who is from the academia. Patrick, I'm going to give you a minute to introduce yourself, but also give us an overview from the academia angle. What is your take as far as issues of the benefit sharing arrangements are concerned, especially from the academia? Over to you, Dr. Patrick, if you're already online.
Thank you very much, Chair. Please let me know if you're able to hear me very well. You know, sometimes you think you're speaking.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Patrick Byakagaba, as the moderator mentioned. Thank you for considering me to get into this discussion. Thank you, Richard Kapere, for your presentation. I listened in. And thank you very much for sharing the details of what Uganda Wildlife Authority does. My take will really go beyond what Kapere presented. Maybe I also need to declare I'm a member of a couple of working groups, but particularly the Red Plus working group on policy. So among the many things that we look at is benefit sharing mechanisms. I want the participants in here to just reflect on why should we even have benefit sharing mechanisms? What is the philosophical underpinning? What's the rationale? We need to build consensus around that. Why should we be having benefit sharing arrangements when it comes to these environmental resources, including wildlife? Is it just being nice? Is it being democratic? Or there is something that is supposed to inform us as to why we should be having benefit sharing mechanisms? And I think that is something that is missing in most of our laws. If you look at, for instance, the Wildlife Act, if you look at the National Forest and Tree Planting Act, they all have arrangements for sharing benefits. But when you look down and you are searching for the underlying principle as to why we should have benefit sharing, you don't clearly see it. In my view, we need to start looking at the issue of equity, meaning we need to see how, especially distributional and procedural equity. Distributional meaning we need to see the sharing of the benefits and the costs associated with the conservation. Who is the most affected when we have a forest, when we have a national park, when we have a wetland? As we push towards conserving these particular resources, what are the costs of conservation and what are the benefits? So until we fully appreciate that there are some people who are more affected by conserving, for instance, if you are living close to a wildlife conservation area, we all know what problem animals can do, crop raiding and so on. So we need to to appreciate that that is something that we need to address. Then for distribution, rather for procedural equity, we need to have a discussion on agreeing to involve the different actors, especially those that are affected by conservation, in decision making. Without getting into the details of Mr. Kapere's submission, he did indicate that as Uganda Wildlife Authority, currently they are sharing 20% of the gate collection. I hope you got him very well. Gate collection, not the revenue that Uganda Wildlife Authority collects, but gate collection. And we all know that gate collection is really paltry. It's really the smallest amount of revenue that Uganda Wildlife Authority collects. Can we borrow lessons from elsewhere? I'll give an example. In the oil and gas sector, there's an, at least the law that we have, we are talking of about 1% of the royalties going to local governments. That is a fair attempt of trying to address the issue of distribution of equity. Then when I look at some of the work we've done in this region on some of the challenges, maybe Mr. Chair, if you allow me just to use maybe 1 minute to just share with you some experience elsewhere, both here in Uganda and the neighboring countries within the region. These are some of the issues or challenges that we identified, which I think would be very useful for this discussion. We observed that the benefits to the community are extremely marginal. If you look at the direct benefits that these wildlife conservation areas, these protected areas that we have, the revenue that is generated, whether it's from tourism, whether it's from the value, the environmental value, the benefits compared to what is given to the communities that are adjacent to these areas is extremely marginal. It's very low. And partly the reason it's because the rationale, the philosophy behind having benefit sharing mechanisms is something we have not built consensus on. As an academic, I still believe we should look at the cost and benefit distribution. Then there's also an issue of this inequality. You'll find, I think Mr. Kapere did mention that in Windi, they are giving about, the amount of money they give to the households there is a bit different from other national parks. Now, those of us who like fairness, you'll agree with me, while the gorilla is really one of the best iconic species that we have, and therefore we should indeed conserve it, how do the people in Murchison, for instance, Murchison Conservation Area feel when they hear that in Windi they are getting more than what Murchison is getting, simply because Windi is getting more revenue because of the attractiveness? I'm still of the view that we need to have some standard rate. But of course, those that generate more can get more in the spirit of equity. But how do we ensure that we don't feel there's unevenness or inequality in the sharing of some of these benefits? Then we have also observed, even in other countries, the revenues do not actually reach the rightful beneficiaries. I will again use the example of Mr. Kapere. He did mention that the 20% that is collected, that goes to the local government, rather that goes to the community, goes to local governments. And you ask yourself, how do the households directly benefit if we are to use the principle of who is affected most? Is there additionality? What do we see? We see the resources go to local government. Now, we all know who is in the local government. It's usually the local elites who can qualify to be a councillor, who can qualify to be a chairperson. Those people are the ones that are going to define what will be implemented in the landscape. So you find that it is the people who are already better off who are benefiting from these arrangements. And by the way, I give these views not just because Uganda is doing it. You go to Rwanda, same thing. You go to Tanzania, same thing. All these countries around this region, they seem to be following the same formula. We seem not to be looking at what works for us and why we should be using that approach. And then lastly, Chair, hey, I'm winding up, Chair, in case I've used more time. We need to have a discussion within. We need to have a discussion on this bit. Is it fair that what comes to these communities ends up in the local government?
I think we have lost Doctor. The technical team, please, you could try to say, I'll do Dr. another round to wrap it up. But let me come
No,
to
I was.
Eric.
Are you able to hear me? I can hear you.
Is vulnerable issues of equity and inequality. So for you as someone who is on the grassroots, as someone who has been involved with the the Bantu community, please share with us your experience. Do you really feel that you've been accepted as people who have been neglected and have been probably forgotten by issues of historical imbalances? Over to you, 2 minutes to share with us your experience as someone who has been at the front line of the work that you do with the Bantu communities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Actually, I would answer with a no because if I tell you, if I go back to one person who was telling us a few things, who was the person, Mr. Richard, you remember him ignoring the issue of the party. I will not go to that. He said I will not go to that. But he said these are human beings. They can't be where? Yes, we are human beings. But yes, we are human beings. But my ancestors, of course, we have grown up in the world, in the iPhone world. But my ancestors, yes, they were not what? Animals, but they were living with animals, and they preserved those animals. And when we talk, as of now, Mr. Richard might be driving a Range Rover or something, but my father might be 40, and yet his dad or something that what? Where this man is working. So I say I have not benefited that way. But Mr. Richard is doing what? Benefiting, and he's saying moreover 20% is applicable. So the 20% for me I have not even benefited because first and foremost, there is no mutual at the government, the local government representation. We don't not have any representative that choose something. And even if we go and contest and aspire, we are always vexed and isolated. If I go back to Mr. Achika's word, lack of esteem and losing esteem, such things make us do what? Get mindsets that are not okay. Like for me, I might be speaking this English and I want my other people to speak this. So when we say benefits and whatever, I have not benefited at all because even when you say William Mugaika Conservation Trust has given us some piece of land, you can't go to a roof and ask them the land title and they present it to you. They don't even have the capacity to like rent it to a person to dig it. And moreover, they don't have the crops to grow that land. I rather say I've not benefited, and I would say we shall keep on with the hustle to telling people that we still want to be compensated and also to be given the right and hope that ever since our grandfathers, because let me give you something to like, give you what is my cry and what is my hope. You are from the other tribes, but we are from the Bantu tribes, I specifically say. If you are deceased and me, your son, you preserve something that I go and survive on that something. You are deceased, but me, who you try to make sure I go to a certain level, I'm not at any level at all. Because, and yet you preserve something for me to make sure I gain something in life. That is very hurting. So I disagree with you, sir, that have benefited at all. But I thank those who have made me benefit, like the NGO, called the United Organization for Backward Development. But for the government, I'm not well contented yet, because even I'm always current with the Human Rights Commission. They have come for very many sessions in our place. And whenever I am quarreling, people say I'm very bad, but I am fighting for my right. Yeah, so that is all I can say on top of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elia. I will go to the online participant, Mr. Ogira from Karamoja. Ogira Charles, I hope you're online. I'm going to have you come through. You get set because Councilor Morgan, I carry my constitution here. When you hear from Elia speaking, it is very clear that he is very frustrated. But the Constitution under Article 32 says that affirmative action in favor of marginalized groups. It says under clause 1 that notwithstanding anything in this Constitution, The state shall take affirmative action in favor of groups marginalized on the basis of gender, age, disability, or any other reason, created by history, tradition, or custom, for purposes of redressing embarrassment which exist against them. I would want to hear from you. Of course, down there you talk about the issue of the Equal Opportunities Commission. I'll come back to you when I hear from Ogira whether you think that away from the legal what we have on the paper, whether that has actually been addressed. Ogira Charles, you are working with the indigenous communities in Karamoja. Please give us your experience, because here Elia shared with us about the challenges the Bantu communities face, especially in the sub-region and other parts of Uganda. What's the case with the people in Karamoja, the Tibet, the Iki, all those people are working with? Please get online and share with us your experience. Thank you. You have to start. Putting here. What do I put? Please guide. Okay. Charles, I hope you're there. Charles? Charles Ogira is supposed to be online. I hope that is, I hope we didn't lose him. In Karamoja, the network may not be very stable. But meanwhile, as we get him, let me pick some issues, especially how do we get it off from the paper to reality and alternative affirmative action?
Thank you very much. Should I start? I thought you've already seen me, right? Okay, that's a very wonderful question. You see, this constitution itself is, well, it should be self-executory, but we all agree that there must be other pieces of legislation for purposes of giving it the life that deserves. When you read that provision, specifically close to, it requires Parliament to come up with laws specifically to cure some of the imbalances that have been created. There's something so interesting about the Constitution, that it gives us rights, all of us. But there's something so special about it is that it recognizes the aspect that however much that we are equal, there are some other imbalances, some that are historical, that are supposed to be cured by what he calls affirmative action. To date, I don't know any other law apart from the law established in the Equal Opportunities Commission that has been established under this law, specifically to cure some historical imbalances. Obviously, we have other laws on gender, children, and all of that, but I don't know, especially when it comes to indigenous people, the Bantu communities, I don't know any other law, obviously, that cures that. That notwithstanding, I feel that's not a justification itself, that the absence of this affirmative law, or a law providing for affirmative action, is a justification for not upholding the rights and freedoms of the people that have been marginalized by history. One of them is we have a Bill of Rights that provides for issues to do with land rights, issues to do with freedom of expression, association, and all, you can name them. So I always have a honest belief that even in absence of laws that provide for affirmative action, we can still utilize the current legal regime to uplift those communities that we feel have been left behind or are facing historical injustices. So in my honest opinion, with or without a law, this is not necessarily a legal issue. It's a societal issue that we need to confront. We need to understand that there are people that have been left behind, and we use the existing legal regime to uplift them. Because if we don't have that kind of attitude, you'll have the law, but again, that law is not going to work because you don't have the attitude. You've not appreciated the problem that you have people that have been left behind because of the historical justices. That's the long and short. I don't know whether my answer is short.
You make a point, but I know that there was a case that the Bantu communities filed,
yes,
through Pedro Nazalika, who is actually working with indigenous minorities,
and the Constitutional Court was very instrumental, especially in ensuring that the rights of the indigenous minorities, indigenous communities, that should be upheld. In the one and later of Article 32. So maybe I think this discussion, as Mr. Who's the advice does, we need to also do benchmarking some other countries. For example, like in Nigeria, where they'll be able to incorporate, for example, issue of the community development agreements to ensure that the communities are strengthened and leaders really take them. Now we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to go back to the online audience and I'll come back to Elia to actually give your take and then do we have Ogira coming through? Very good. So let's have Ogira because we need to capture something from Karamoja. Ogira, Charles. Charles, we can have you, I think, if the technology can allow. I had already asked you that we already heard from Elia giving us his experience, especially from the matter of communities. We want to compare whether it is a kind of course issue when it comes to Karamoja sub-region, especially where there are a number of indigenous communities in the Beret, the Iki, all those communities that you are working with. Please share with us your experience and also make some recommendations on the action that we take going forward. What about you, Ogira, Charles, please?
Thank you very much, Moderator Robert Turachira, the most outstanding and impactful HRD of 2022. Thank you so much, colleagues, for what you've shared in regards to the topic of discussion today. I am Charles Donaldson Ogira. For those who do not know me, I work for Karamoja Rights Advocates Network, and I also coordinate the Sub-Saharan Africa Loss and Damage Youth Coalition Network. Straight to the point, the rationale behind benefit sharing is to ensure that communities directly affected by resource extraction and development projects receive a fair share of the benefits that are extracted from their environment. And the approach, as it is, the government deems it fit that it aims at promoting social equity, sustainable development, and foster a sense of collaboration between and among stakeholders for long-term positive outcomes. However, unfair distribution of benefits, of benefit sharing arrangement have led to social unrest. We have seen in Karamoja geologists being killed, maybe because of the trickle-down effect of the non-benefit sharing, which is unfair. That could be one of the reasons that have sparked the local communities to, go into social unrest, to claim for what they feel is rightful for them to benefit from. We have from the Uganda Wildlife Authority, Kidepo buffer zones, where people living along the buffer zones areas of Kidepo have experienced encroachment, have experienced wildlife influx to their communities, which affects in one way or the other their plantation, and they cannot recover from such until when they are able to be empowered. Some of these things just deepen existing inequalities. They don't trust and create negative perception of development initiatives that the government willfully brings to puts on black and white paper for our consumption. Yet in the other end, the mechanisms that they downplay now in the implementation of it tend to create some of this inequitable distribution that affects a long-term relationship. Yeah, the legal frameworks on sharing benefits plays a crucial role. And that is if the laws are supportive and clear to create a foundation for fair benefit. But we have seriously seen in the areas of Tepeth where the people, I saw Charles Toposa, is it Charles Toposa, a representative from Tepeth. We have seen people from Benet community have effects arising from their communities, just because Uganda Wildlife Authority feels that they do not belong to where they are, and so they feel they should be subjected to extinct. So some of these things really affects continuity in regards to trust in government. We have also seen that the lack of transparency, community involvement, and fair distribution of benefits have soiled a relationship among stakeholders, not only but also through local people, where the indigenous community tend to be highly affected. In Karamoja, we have several ethnic minority indigenous groups, like the Ethur in Abim. They are usually faced by the influx of wildlife from the Kidepo buffer zones. In Napak, we have the Bokora corridor, where a lot of mineral extraction takes place, and also wildlife activities that takes place there. But you don't get some of our roads are one of the most dilapidated, and I think the tourists find it very hard to find their way out to some of these places. But we thank God that we are seeing the government making efforts to put an airport in Kidepo Valley National Park. So without any further ado, I would like to end here at the moment as I hear from you, Robert. Back to you, Robert, at the command center.
Thank you so much, Charles. We shall be getting back to you, Charles. We shall be getting back to you to give your parting shots. But let me come back to your panel, because we want to ensure that this conversation is as participatory as possible. We look at issues of equity, issues of equality, issues of the human rights-based approach, the legal regime, and issues that are coming from the community. So let me come back to your plenary. Definitely would assist me and try that if any of us have some inputs or some reactions, especially in line with some of those, then from there we can be able to come back to the panel and be able to have action points and issues with their way forward, what we need to do. So I'll take I think about like three comments. Three comments that we please kindly. Yes, we start with you. Thank you. You keep it short in the terms of time, please, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much. 3 things. The affirmative action as enshrined in Article 72 should not only be in terms of disability youth, but must be actualized in terms of social services, in terms of schools, health facilities, road infrastructure, and other few. The BMCT, Baika Conservation Trust, working for the Patwa and Baila, there could be other faith-based organizations. Why are they not giving you the land titles or the land agreements? What are they fearing? We need to develop an interest and also audit the kind of work they do. Otherwise, they may own land and they're using you. Again, the people in the base, Mount Morocco, you seem to be sitting on a time bomb. That forest up there is owned by NFA, and you are not allowed to develop or carry out any permanent infrastructure. So maybe at the moment's notice, something wrong may go back anytime. And likewise to we the Bennetts, about 2,500 hectares of land fully occupied, but UWA is claiming ownership. And we are currently experiencing a lot of threatened evictions, and we don't know our fate. And so, just also to put it clear, the Bennetts, according to community census, we are about 18,000 community census. We are standard people. Cannot hold a national identity card, cannot get a travel document, cannot get a financial loan from any financial institution, because we are not yet recognized in the subscript of Uganda national constitutions. Advocacy is underway together with the UA and NCR, but we seem to be, the will, the political will is not there. A few months ago, I and a team of elders took a petition to Speaker's Chambers, and I think the issue is at Attorney General's office, and we are yet to see. And I want to be a legal fortified citizen. By must getting a national identity card or a passport, then I have to register myself in the name of a tribe that already exists in the constitution. Because I'm not in the system. It's very bad. It means a lot. And I don't want my children to be stainless anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's a very good carrying call and according to Jekyll. But seriously, any other comment? We can have his view.
I suppose I just would like to put 3 issues. As indigenous communities in Karamoja, we have been doing a lot of advocacy in terms of, first of all, engaging government with the political will. And that's why we had that recombination of adding more MPs, like the one of the myself would like to.
A good friend here is from the EG.
Yes. So one of the steps has been that how do we make laws if we cannot make numbers work better and make sure the set of the market that touches us will represent it? We felt there was a gesture of goodwill there. Then Karamoja is a place that is now open for development. And this development, there is a competing climate in investment and conservation. So most of the districts have a low civic competence in even drafting or crafting social environment, I mean strategic environment and social assessment, either frameworks or this and that. So people are splitting in between all of this. Whom do we now blame? If even in conservation, the investment of mining and all this and that, and of recent, you are all aware, apart from minerals, we have 2 oil basins. So I think that's also an addition of another conflict that will confuse us. So we don't know what shall we face to and what shall we stand for. Then thirdly, we have also been having weak structural engagements from the local communities or the indigenous people, because we are trying to form trusts. But our performance towards engaging into a negotiation is still very weak. Because the rate at which they even negotiate, we don't have valuers, we don't have good lawyers who stand for this and that, and you just find the investor putting a conditional rate on table and say, take it or leave it. And given the human development index of the region, we are too poor. So people always they fear even to make sure the money goes back. So you are unconditionally forced just to receive, then you begin lamentations later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to give you the opportunity to a lady, because earlier on I was arguing with Mr. Machika that I need a lady who can articulate issues of indigenous communities. Definitely you have the microphone, then I'll go to Baka as the last line. Yes, please. I know you've been work on much, so please just have your view as far as that is concerned.
Thank you. My inquiry goes to I didn't get his name.
Is area Nanyumana?
Yes, area. So I understand from you that the indigenous communities have limited participation and most just say that the community development agencies. That's yes. So I had an inquiry to make. Do you think that there's a role, like actual or inaction, for the indigenous community that has led to this lack of representation? They are aware that it's not been properly organized. There's some kind of resistance that has led to the underrepresentation.
Okay, thank you so much, David. As you come through, and you actually made a point in this was not definitely is raising, but I'm going to say to qualify. He said there was a problem with structural weakness, and not really well organized. And I think this discussion is quite timely to ensure that we really cascade this
kind of arrangement at the community level stadium. But Baka, you're really very, please talk about the ecosystem issues as far as the indigenous communities are concerned.
I want to speak to you had the tears running when my young brother speak. How whistles trade. It's something come into your mind that this legal framework. And it was like what you presented. Something come into your mind that there's no this legal framework today. How best we applied to make STRs come through. That even up to now, when you are outlining for the good, and we are convinced that they are made for the communities. But a one person who can come to Kampala.com is bringing that kind of tone. Do you think your good framework is really meant for the people? And at what level now? This is my question. All of us. At what level we use the frameworks to speak to the would-be situation, the would-be scenarios, bringing the voices of the most vulnerable in these communities. And two, what are these big gaps? You think we should fix now, which you imagine would be a hindrance to respond to the cries of these communities?
Thank you so much, Baka. Please, Jay, I'm going to give you just less than a minute from in the interest of gender balance. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for the discussion. I think I'm audible.
You please use the microphone.
Yes, we have deliberated upon the indigenous people, the indigenous knowledge, and I wanted us to also dwell on the indigenous seeds. Okay. We all know that the indigenous, we call them genetic materials, are resistant and they are sweet. And then they brought in the GMO, which is still, I think, under discussion. So to me, I wanted to pass this to council. And area. What is your take on this? Because we are getting extinct in every local or indigenous scene. Whatever we are having on table, believe me or not, is it because of climate change, because of the increase in our population, but somehow, somewhere, even the birds we eat of late, they are so exotic. We no longer enjoy those fruits, those foods. They are drought resistant. Those kind of crops or seeds we used to enjoy, the mapera, the mangoes. So of late, whatever we eat, if we are extinct of those indigenous seeds, and the indigenous knowledge is also, I think, being wiped away slowly. And so what should the indigenous people dwell on when it comes to the indigenous or generic materials?
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Nachiranda. Council, you have the last word, but let me start with Area to actually respond to the issue put to you, and I will keep it within 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Talking about the indigenous seeds and all that you just sending down. If I don't have access to where I can get those things, how do you want me to give you that, all that this seed you want? If you are saying that going into a park or going into a forest reserve, I need a permit, and I'm not able to pay that permit. Yes, so how do you want me to get you that knowledge? And also, if my father is there drinking water because he has that misery with him, that he was not given that chance to go and preserve those things himself, How do you want him to teach me, and yet I have to go for social studies and chemistry school?
So meaning we have lost.
That one is a one case, but there is an ongoing operation with the NEMA. And I was opposing them, but I finally agreed. They are trying to get those hubs, the local hubs from the Batwa people. And why I was saying they know to them, it's because many people have come and stole a lot of knowledge from my people when I'm seeing. They just come, take the knowledge, they don't come back and feedback that this is what has come out of the law. Are we together? So for you to tell me that the indigenous plants are going out, there are people who know those things, but they don't have the access to those things. If they had the access now, they wouldn't be taking a moxie one. Are you getting my point?
Yeah.
Then to her inquiry, if I don't have a voice, how do you want me to? If I don't have a voice, like a voice to reach out to the people that it's the concerned people, and if every paper I take, now we have a petition, they are being kicked out of that. So how will I reach where I want, and what will I gain from the government of Uganda? Let me give you a small scenario. I've answered you. I've got a chance to go outside Uganda. But one thing that hurt me, when I was applying for my new passport, and I put I am in Mutwa online, then I paid to the bank, going to interview me. They said I go to room 32. From room 32, room 20 something. All that looking for if I am what? A citizen. But I'm Mutwa. Going to his point, he said he doesn't want his children to do what?
Headless.
Thank you very much. So with us getting these people, like I've always told the Emily team, if we can get what we call the IPRTF, that is the Indigenous Peoples Response Task Force, for all the information that comes under the Indigenous peoples to take to our people, I tell you, we shall not be arguing with any of you, with any government officials, if we handle those things, and if the government can do us one thing kindly. We don't want to go to court for higher things and whatever. Imagine it is 32 years ever since eviction, but nothing has been done. How do you want me to go in the line to go and say, I'm getting a ballot, and so on? So that one can't work. So you rather come to our cries and make sure you do things, because we shall at one time face the UN people, and things will work out if you don't want us to do them. I'm telling you.
I really can appreciate your passion speaking this. I'll go to my online panelists. Do we have any feedback from our online audience? Because I don't, in the spirit of not leaving anyone behind, I know that Mr. Husi has advised that we cannot leave, that it is delusional for us to attempt to not leave anyone behind. But personally, I can do what I can. Anyone online that you could use the chat room. I want to leave your voices. Please kindly have your voice heard. Very good. I can say something. Projection there. Technical team, please. You help me. Let me have Dr. Byakagaba to try and wrap it up. Doctor, you've had some voices from the plenary, and people are really concerned about some of these issues. But of course, also speak the issues of the human rights-based approach. Over to you, Doctor. Doctor is offline. Oh, sorry, we lost him. I think he was going to teach maybe his classes. Okay, we can have Mr. Ogira Charles if he's still online. Yes, very good. Charles is still online. Charles, you've had the feedback from the plenary. Please, over to you in less than 2 minutes with your response.
Thank you, Robert. To begin with, in regards to human rights-based approach in benefit sharing, I feel that there's need for us to recognize the fact that benefit sharing involves recognizing and respecting the fundamental rights of all individuals who are faced by challenges arising from the extraction of natural resources in their communities, as it emphasizes inclusivity, participation, and non-discrimination and accountability. These are some of the pillars that we should be in position to recognize in regards to advocacy for a human rights-based approach in benefit sharing. Also, this will help us to uphold the dignity of humans and promote social justice and respect of rights of the affected communities. I do not think, for example, the people of Karamoja who are largely affected by several companies like Sunbelt, Tororo Cement, among others, can be in any happiness with the government if the benefits that they should be accorded does not trickle down to their advantage. They still live in abject poverty. They still live in total isolation where the legal frameworks do not really target them. Recently, I saw a clip by Resource Rights Africa about how human bodies are exhumed from some of the mineral-rich lands in Karamoja. That is how disheartening you feel that even these companies do not really conduct due diligence. So we should actually now be having the nexus between human rights-based approach and human rights due diligence in promoting benefit sharing. Something of the kind will help us to have a further reach on excluding, on bringing an halt to discrimination, bringing an halt to, lack of participation by the local communities whose lands are affected. So Robert and the rest of the members in the House, I feel we need to conduct more research. We need to speak up more often and document human rights allegations that happens in the extractive communities for us to be in position to know how the indigenous people suffer within their own communities and how their natural resources have turned out to be, a bomb that that is fronted against them. Let me end here for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Charles. A round of applause for Charles, members in the plenary. Thank you so much, Charles. You can see the hand clap from the plenary. I must really appreciate that you've been a very wonderful panelist, Dr. Patrick Leff. But I want also to organize all those online. I can see Madam Susan Wasubira. I can see Mr. Mukandida, my very good friend, Mr. Sema Mohammed from the Ministry of Water and Environment. I remember one time Mr. Sema was asking, but what is this thing to do with the indigenous people? Who are the indigenous people? I wish today he has really got the answer that those are actually the people who have would live their livelihood from ecosystems. Now, talking about ecosystems and ecosystem justice, Morgan, you have heard from what my friend Rebecca has said to you. Of course, at some point, I sympathizing with you because he was putting in the whole state. I even moved my jacket. I had the opportunity to read the reading of this report, the one that was talking about the urban communities. And his lordship, or may he so rest in the economies, Justice Kenneth Kapoor was very instrumental in the underpinning the fact that we need a human rights-based approach, especially in upholding the rights of the indigenous communities. That we should not be looking at ourselves as if we are doing them a favor, but their rights are actually constitutional and fundamental. So to that extent, really, I would like to hear from you because you've been put on the spot that these laws play work with the people. I know that there are UN guiding principles of business and human rights. If I want to submit in Karamoja, I know that the Ministry of Gender, Relevance and Women has come up with the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. And I know you've been part of very many cases, for example, in Tiandongo, you've been fighting for people, the protected affected persons, right? Personally, when we were involved in the issue of the Goma case, I was very, very disheartened by the people who derive their livelihood from Bugoma Forest, the people around Chikube. Because when we talk about ecosystems, the Badwa people are part of the ecosystem and they should be protected to that extent. So how do we move forward? And I think there's a segment on what is the way forward, but you could take us off the way forward section as far as issues of breathe right into the law. The limits of gender is coming with social accountability bill. How do we ensure that we actually have it like the way Mr. Kuza said that in Nigeria is a community development agreement? How do we ensure that we take the advantage of the bill and the limits of gender is coming up to say the communities have the power to actually hold the developers accountable in light of social community agreements? Over to you, 2 minutes.
First, just like Robert has said, this is my 4th year working with project affected persons. And I can feel the pain of all the victims. I think at some point that was around 2001, 2021. I told Aaron that I need to take leave of some cases that are related to project affected persons because they really break you down. Now I'm imagining me who is working for them, breaking down. So what happens to them that face these realities? You can imagine. All of us, all we can do is imagining. But they have the answer. And I could feel the pain of my brother here when he was speaking. And I totally understand him. You see, when I was giving, there's a question that was asked to me here on, I think, Mr. Robert, on the issue of affirmative action. And if we need laws, and I categorically stated that our solution may not necessarily be laws. Because the legal regime that we have is sufficient enough to protect everyone, including women, by law, including children. You don't have a specific, you don't need a specific law to do that. And I know there are very many international instruments that have come up to uplift certain classes of people, specifically to uplift them from the historical injustices. And in all my submissions, wherever I've gone, my argument has been, if we're keen enough to look at all the international instruments that we have, we don't even need any other law on affirmative action. For example, you're talking about a human rights-based approach. The Constitution of Uganda gives the right to every person a right to do what? To associate. You have the right to participate in the governance of your country. You get it? You have the right to access to what? Information. You have the right to express your opinions. It doesn't matter whether you're a woman, it doesn't matter whether you're a man, it doesn't matter whether you're a child, it doesn't matter whether you are an indigenous person or not. It doesn't matter, so long as you are a human being. And those, all of those standards are within the international instruments. Then tell me why you need affirmative action, if at all you are able to implement the laws that we have. So for me, the solution is not the laws. The solution is the implementation of even the little that we have. How do you implement the little that you have? How the will. You get it? How the what? The will. You know, when I was presenting this, the regulation on genetic resources and access sharing, one of the most important key, there are 2 important aspects that I talked, in fact, there are 3 important aspects that I talked about. One was on public participation, very important. Public what? Participation. 2, on access to information. Hide the information, you're done with people. But this is a right that is within the law. What else do you want? You get it? The other aspect is on the issue, or the other element is on the aspect of institutions. You have the whole authority that is responsible for making sure that the communities negotiate and have terms that favor them. And my question is, do those communities participate and and participate in the agreements, especially when it comes to the material transfer agreements and access agreements. Do they? Look, it's a question of enforcement. It's not the question of what a legal regime. And yes, just I know your signal to stop. But I know this was a hot question. Let me put it down. So at the end of the day, these are institutions that must work, and we must be questioning them why they're not working. And as civil society, you have that very big obligation to make sure that you hold these entities accountable. They must function. I can assure you, if most of those lead agencies are functioning, then there are some questions that we're not going to hear. Someone asked me about the question on yes, the genetic seeds. I think most of most of the issues that we have, because you realize these are results of research and technology, right? Huh? But do people participate in that research and what? And innovations? They don't. So the issue, if we really appreciate the concepts of a human rights-based approach, just utilize the little framework that you have. If there are loopholes, you can always amend, but just utilize the framework that you have. I can assure you we can solve 80% of the problems that you're citing here. The problem is just the political will. There is no will whatsoever.
Thank you so much, Round of applause for Council. In a better way, and I must confess that as environmental human rights defenders, for us, we say that we are going to push for the human rights-based approach. An attack on an ecosystem is an attack on indigenous communities. Because while for us, we are looking at the forest, the Bantu people are looking at their home. For them, it is their house. While you're looking at planting sugar canes, for them, they actually are looking at extinction. You are rendering them extinct. And I must confess that Mr. Wizi made a very good recommendation that Mr. Pachika really take on engaging Parliament. Because probably next engagement should be able to bring members of the Committee on Climate Change and also the Committee on the Environment and Natural Resources. I myself, this year, I said that on the World Environment Day, I'll host an environment parliament where we shall be able to discuss, where we are discussing some of these issues, combing down issues of legal and policy issues, especially on environment and climate change. So going forward, I think our opportunity has been able to capture the take homes, because this discussion is very timely, and I think we need to carry on with very key action points, especially underpinning the issue of the human rights-based approach. And as Morgan has said, it is a very, very robust legal framework for us. But of course, the problem is really on the implementation. But as we all know, that implementation should happen at the local government, at the local level, in the communities. But you can't implement what you don't know. So we need also to get, I think you shared the presentation, we also need to disseminate this information, ensure there's the creation of awareness creation, especially within us as civil society, but also engaging other stakeholders, like religious institutions, like cultural institutions, to ensure that we all play a good role. And then finally, engaging government. I think it's a critical issue. Government institutions, for example, Ministry of Gender and Transition Development, as I said, is an ongoing process for the social accountability bill. We need to pay attention to some of these processes so that we all, make inputs to say at that level we are able to, amplify the voices of the indigenous communities. With all that, it's been a great pleasure for me to moderate this session. I want to hand over back to Mr. Machika, or maybe definitely you can take over, so that we can be able to wrap it up and go for lunch. Thank you very much. Round of applause for my panel. Indigenous communities of the Batwa, also Morgan Miro from Kizan Economics, Ecofisa Environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I just want to first extend our sincere thanks First, I want to extend their thanks to all the representatives of indigenous peoples, who sometimes we drill down to call ethnic minorities. I have had challenges before. Never use the word ethnic minority, but then that's what the Constitution says. Nonetheless, I know this is quite happening at the very tedious time of the year, when everyone is running to catch up with families, and most especially our virtual participants who have been online. Can you display them? I know we had Beatrice, we had Ruth, we had Mr. Baguma, and so many, Winfred. We have been working and we will continue to work with our colleagues in the Greater Virunga landscape, where most of this lies. And we will continue to push and advocate for the linkage of people, nature, and climate. We will also continue this debate. I don't want to put Mr. Elias' energy to stand still. We were supposed to do one activity this year, but because of sequencing and getting the right duty bearers, we have had to push it to next year. And that is the dialogue on rights and nature-based solution. And we hope that the culmination of all this information and experiences we are getting will be used during that dialogue, where we have all the duty bearers, the judiciary, and preferably the Ministry of Justice there to discuss and find some lasting solutions on these issues. Today, we are looking at capacity, and I think there has been some knowledge transfer. Anyone with a show of hands who say he hasn't learned anything? Anyone saying that for me, I haven't learned. I came, the way I came is the one going back. So I think we need to clap for Emily and David up there. Most especially our resource persons. That means that you have transferred knowledge. And knowledge is power. Without knowledge, just remain with you. But also having too much knowledge is powerless. You know that. Because when you know too much, there is nothing you urge for. When they tell you people are dying of hunger, yes, we did an assessment for Karamoja, we know. You see? So we need also to balance how we use the knowledge. But for me, I want to say that it has come out clearly that indeed the benefit sharing arrangements we have, they are not yet into full implementation. Those that we are implementing, there exist some gaps which we need to address. And when someone tells me, whenever there is a challenge and you're executing an initiative, there is always something to be done. And that is what we call safeguards. Yes. Now, how do we ensure that we uphold safeguards across all these actions? Because basically, all of you know, safeguards are initiatives put in place to do no harm, to minimize the harm. Before Topothi's grandchild is told, for you to access a shrub from Kidepo Valley, you need to have clearance in the names of controlled access or regulated access. There are those who don't listen, who don't wait, who think that when you are moving around a road which is not labeled that it is passing through a restricted area, you can harvest what you want. So how do you ensure that we put in place processes and systems that protect
the duty bearer, but also the resource user. Such that there is no confrontation. The resource user does not confront the duty bearer. The duty bearer also does not confront the what? The resource user. So I just want to wrap all this around a discussion which we are having with Ministry of Water and the UNEP around REDD+ under the auspice of safeguards. And we will continue to expand this capacity building engagements on safeguards. We have already requested the ministry that from our small evaluations, the number of actors are saying we need to know more about what the safeguards are. We have only talked about the Cancun safeguards. We have not talked about safeguards under where. We have not talked about safeguards under even other arrangements apart from just markets, but also the non-markets, also the non-timber forest products harvesting. So in terms of next steps, I want to say that we will continue to document all this, what has come today. And please feel free if you have not addressed a comment, but you put it in writing, put it at the secretariat desk behind, or send an email. For those who are online, we want to commit our pledge that the findings and the conclusions from this capacity building workshop will continue to inform and shape our dialogue for next year in January. With regard to the benefit sharing arrangement information, because it has been capacity building, this information is going to be loaded on YouTube. And already I'm told it's on YouTube, because we know some of you don't have time to now wait for emails. So the presentations, you can continue to follow them on YouTube, but we will also load them into the Power slide sharing photos, such that you can continue to access this information. One of the lacunas I'm telling you, and lawyers, you need always to remind us, we just make big allegations. The first time I was asked about benefit sharing arrangement with who, I said they charge a 20% levy. And a colleague came and go back and say it's not a levy. I refused because I never wanted to get ashamed. I refused, I said, that's what I've said. But we will organize it. Today, Richard has reminded us, it's 20%, get what? Get fee. But you see, when you're doing that advocacy, you say they are charging 20% what? Levy. Then, and now when you move in that advocacy, that's where now they start tossing. They say, but the law doesn't provide for it. Where are you getting it from? But someone said it. So we need to be consistent. And we need to have clear advocacy issues. You have had access is granted, but is what? Regulated. Not restricted, regulated. The advocacy we have had, people are restricted. Maybe they don't want to ask for permits. Now, how do we create an enabling environment where there is a special group whom you can say, please, for you, you can walk through? You see, now, these are some of the things we get when we share with a number of you. I'm happy in the room, we have so many land friends. I asked a question, the lady justice said, go to High Court. How far with the High Court case? I don't know what happened to pro bono services, Robert, Daphne, and some of you. Why do you hate pro bono? I know you have to put a nice suit, but let's continue to do pro bono services. Huh? Let's do pro bono. Now you see, it might take us other 10 years to move from the order to even the first hearing in the High Court. Yet, if some of you were still merciful and happy You love indigenous peoples, like some of us who have worked with them for long. You can take it up as a pro bono initiative and say, I need to follow this case, and I want to make sure the submission goes to High Court. But we have also legal response teams, which I know continue to work internationally. How do we bring them and pick up this case such that it's expedited? Justice put it clearly that it needs to be expedited. Before evidence is lost, the next time you'll find the petitioners, half of them dead. As we are looking for those who died, even in the photos they had have already vaporized. So how do we ensure that we have timely justice? And as I conclude, learning doesn't stop. From the international instruments we have shown, how do we connect the dots to ensure that the benefit sharing arrangements go beyond the current gaps? So this might call for detailed assessment. Can you, I saw ENR, I saw PENATWINE. How do we launch these clear studies such that we have things that move forward? So with those few, I want to say it has been a very good day to interact with our colleagues, especially the indigenous peoples. I know you come from far, but thank you for the commitment. And those who have been online, thank you for really being with us through this. This might be our last engagement with a number of you. So from Emily and the board, I want to say a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to most of you who will not be interacting. And to those we are still going to have lunch together, I want to say bon appetit. As you know how we do, all the refunds will be communicated via your mobile money payments for those who are entitled to them. So have a good afternoon and a good day. Lunch is provided in the room next, please. So you join us for lunch.
Yes.